Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Danny Mendoza, he, him. Over the last few months, we have gone on a massive, sprawling, epic journey called Rocket Club, a multi-stage anthology. Across 4 different channels, here on Streaming Rainbow, but also Pocket Dragon Pub, Nerds with Dice, and Pantsless Tables. We've told 5 interconnected stories using a brilliant new TTRPG called Rocket Club. Rocket Club is a game about precocious, rocket-obsessed middle schoolers facing a terrifying alien invasion while dealing with their own volatile emotions. The game has just finished open playtesting through Evil Hat Productions, now at the end of May 2026. If you're watching this when this first comes out or anytime after, you just missed that window. But if you did pick up the playtesting materials, which were incredibly generous, it was a 172-page PDF plus supporting materials for free, just for having playtested this game, you still have time to get your playtest feedback in. So if you're watching this when this comes out, or shortly thereafter, through the through the middle of June, you will have the ability to put in your playtest feedback. If you do that, you will get credit in the eventual published book for having been an official playtester for the game, which is very cool. But more important than that, you will have taken this already amazing game and helped make it even better with the feedback that you've provided. So please get in there and do that if you can. It has been at evilhat.com/rocket-club. There is, I would imagine, still likely at the time you're watching this, information on the game available at that URL, even if you can't get the playtest materials. If you signed up for the playtest, you have the Google form already. If you're not sure how to access the Google form, you can feel free and reach out to us and ask us about that, and we can help you find it. Also, the people who emailed you the materials for the Google form from Evil Hat should be able to give you that information as well. With all of that said, today we are sitting down with the architect of this multiverse. Please welcome the creator and writer of Rocket Club, Em Hubbard. Em, thank you so much for trusting us with your game, for being here today. After all that talking, I would love to pass it over to you to introduce yourself and share anything that you want to open with.
Yeah, hey everybody, I am Em. I use they, them pronouns. I'm super happy to be here chatting with Danny, and really appreciative to anyone who's taken an interest in the game over the playtest period, whether you played it or watched the streams or downloaded it and just looked at it. And seriously grateful to you, and would love to hear what you think of it. You can find me at Em Hubbard on Blue Sky, and feel free to reach out.
Love that. I will say, as somebody who is lucky enough to be friends with Em, you should reach out. Em's awesome. Yeah. Also, you should come hang out with us in the Discord here for Streaming Rainbow, because Em also hangs out here and occasionally just makes games. Just is like, hey, I have this idea. What do you think? And we're like, yes, that sounds amazing. And then a game exists a little while later.
If you're a creator of like anything, go to Streaming Rainbow and share it, and they'll be like the most supportive, lovely people, and I will too.
Yeah, 100%. Em is incredibly supportive too. All right, so before we get into Rocket Club as written as a system, or anything that we did with the APs here for the multi-stage anthology, getting into Badlands and the Void Malls, I'd like to hear a bit about your background, and I imagine the audience would too. So I'd love to hear whatever you want to share about that, and then specifically zeroing in on how you started in tabletop design and what your big influences have been growing up and as an adult that led you to making games.
Well, I'm a visual artist by education and work. I'm a painter. I exhibit work around the country for a long time now, and I think the core of what I love about art influences what I do and what I love about game design, which is it's always a question of trying to figure out how to explain something about the world, or how to investigate something about the world and share that with other people. As a painter, I never really think about like I'm making this painting in my studio and it's just for me. I think about how it's going to be a form of communication with other people. And I started creating games in 2020 because it was COVID. I was working from home. I was isolated, bored, lucky, I guess, to be isolated and bored, and that was the worst of what was happening to me. But I started just as a creative exercise, writing little one-page games. I at some point there heard a podcast actual play of The Witch is Dead by Grant Howitt, which is a very cool one-page game, but I had never heard of a one-page RPG until that point. And I think that was still when Grant Howitt was doing one per month. It's like a one-page RPG per month. And I was like, oh, that's a thing that a person can do? Maybe that's a thing that I can do. And it's just like creating artwork. It's that challenge of how can I take an idea or a thing that I want to say or a story that I want to tell. Of course, in this case, it's an RPG, so it's the framework of a story that I want other people to tell, and condense that down into a single page and put art on it and design it and have it look good and be fun. So I just started making these, and I would play them with friends and then just toss them aside. They weren't really meant for anything bigger than that, but it was a fun challenge and something that I really quickly fell in love with.
I'd love to zero in a second on that, making it for friends, because you're not the first person I've had a conversation with who works in TTRPG design who started off making things for their own community, making things for their own tables, and then taking that outside of that context and sharing it with more folks. I imagine a lot of people watching this may have an interest in that as well, right? Whether that be, where is the line between like homebrewing something and home ruling things and creating a context or creating a home world for your character and taking it out to the world for other people to be able to use. What would you want to share with anybody who's at that point in the process about your own process of self-discovery, moving from one part of that to the next, and what they may want to consider as they consider that on their end?
Yeah, I was definitely, I think, have mostly been a TPRG. Wow, that was a jumble of letters. TTRPG player who likes to change the rules as written. I've always liked to take things and tell a different story with it, or adjust it to what I want. When I was young, I was really into White Wolf games, Vampire the Masquerade, and those sorts of things. And then I would take those just rules and be like, well, what if we were robots instead? That's definitely, I think, where that comes from, is just wanting to be able to do something of my own at the table. And I think I'm probably not so much that player anymore, just because there are so many games out there that a lot of times, if there's a story you want to tell, you can find a game that's going to be good to tell it. But yeah, I mean, I think as a creator, when you have a group of friends and people you play with all the time, bringing it to that table is like the starting point of finding out if it works, finding out if it's fun, getting support. And I don't think that games even necessarily have to move past that. If you're having fun with it, if your friends are enjoying it, just keep playing. And it doesn't necessarily have to be something that goes out into the wider world.
I fully agree. But then that does also beg the question, so what was it for you that you feel comfortable sharing that took you from what you were making for your table to, I want to share this with more people?
I think it really was Rocket Club that did it. Rocket Club was a one-page RPG at first, and I played it with, I think, three friends. Sat down and played. We did 3 sessions of this one-page RPG, and it was so much fun that I was like, I need more of this. And I think maybe other people would like it. And also, like, being kind of jumping back to my career as an artist, like, what I do is all about finding an audience and like sharing these stories. And my artwork is about gender identity and my experiences with gender, and I show these paintings at a lot of like college and university galleries, and get to go and see people look at the artwork and say, oh wow, this is really, like, this speaks to me and this is moving for me and I'm glad you're here. So there's just a lot of joy in spreading that out and reaching out to a broader community. As also a big actual play fan, one of my big dreams for Rocket Club was being able to see it in an actual play, and like, check, that's done.
It's really good for actual play, for whatever that's worth, right? Like, I obviously I have a bias because I did a bunch of those, but like I did a bunch of those in part because it fits really, really well for that context. So like I can see, is a little, forgive me, a little bit of gushing at this point, but like I can see people at the table in a not actual play context having a ball with this all the time and having a lot of maneuverability and being able to play it a bunch of different ways for a long time and not get tired of it, find new things in it. In an actual play context, I also find, and this is for anybody watching who does actual play too and hasn't picked up the game yet, I've done 4 different stories in this game that have reasonable differences between them in actual play so far. And not only, and I was doing them at the same time, right? Not only did I not get tired of that, not only do I want more of that right now, I feel like I barely scratched the surface of what I could get into with the system through that. And I also feel like for those specific stories, and this is something that a lot of people who were involved in them also articulated to me, there was a lot left for us to explore, right? Like, one of them we did a 1-shot, 2 of the others did 4 sessions, the 4th did 5 sessions. All of them were like, great, more? Can we do more? And that speaks to what we're able to build at the table, thanks to the architecture that you provided. So thank you for that. You made something great to experience at the table that is also something great to get to tell stories through in an actual play context for that art form that touches your art and brings it into this space and then creates more art using it, right?
Yeah, something I think that's unique about sharing work in TTRPGs is, like you said, it's not really mine anymore. Once it goes out there, it's other people are taking it and telling stories with it and doing something different. And I think that's it's been really interesting to see the stories that you've told and your players have told with it, and just knowing that out there others are also, without recording it, are telling their own stories with it.
I'm really excited. Well, there is that playtest server, right, that Evil Hat set up, and some folks have talked about their home games there, and it's been really interesting for me as well to hear what people are doing with their home games, what they're interacting with here. I thought that was very cool. You mentioned before taking World of Darkness games and like, what if they're robots? That made me want to ask specifically, as sticking with your background a little bit here, has, in terms of genre, right? Because you set this is middle school with an alien invasion. Have you been typically drawn to like science fiction, science fantasy genre stuff before? And if so, what brings you to that?
I don't think so. A lot of my early one-page games were kind of comic horror.
Nice.
One was you're realtors and you're trying to sell a haunted house.
Like that.
And I think Rocket Club maybe even fits that a little bit in that
I clearly think so.
Yeah.
I clearly think so. Yeah.
The mechanics for creating an alien definitely lean toward something pretty scary.
Yeah.
Whereas there is a lightness to, or at least a little bit of absurdity to the kids who have jetpacks and rocket boots.
100%. I think that's a very good way to put it. And on top of that, even just that they're middle school kids.
Yes.
Because we talked about this a little bit in other contexts, and I talked about this a bit with the cast. The emotions really are higher stakes sometimes than the like world-shattering, alien invasion, right? Like we had some big alien invasions going on in some of these shows, right? Like very reality-shaping things. And still, there were a lot of times where it was like the thing that really matters is this emotion that you feel so hugely, right? Especially at that age, that it eclipses everything else. And I think that's so cool and is a very specific, I'd argue, design choice that reflects exactly what you're talking about. Like, I'm not surprised to hear your affinity for comedic horror, right? Or comic horror, because it does very, very much feel like that. And as scary as some moments got for the characters in a lot of these actual plays, they very often met it with comedy as much as anything else, sometimes as an act of defiance against the absurdity. And I think here it's worth quickly, I do this like all the time when I talk about this because I think you did such a cool thing with putting these quotes in. But for those of you watching this, in case you haven't seen the quotes yet, page 7 of the PDF, under the description of middle school and the overall description of Rocket Club as a game, Em, you included these 2 quotes. It is called middle school, and it's the most fiendish, torturous, and horrible place ever conceived in the darkest corner of man's mind. M.E. Castle, popular clone. And being young is a great advantage, since we see the world from a new perspective and we are not afraid of making radical changes. Greta Thunberg. I really think you did something incredibly elegant there, putting these 2 things in conversation, because at the very least for me, and I think in a way that is evocative, right, even before you get into being able to articulate specific things about it as the reader, I fully understand what this game cares about, what it's set up to do, what it feels like, just from what you constructed there, putting those 2 things in conversation with each other. Obviously, everything else that you wrote directly that contextualizes it gives you much more concrete grounding about what this game is. But at a level of feeling, right? Mm-hmm. I feel like these 2 quotes did something to make it click in my head that just shot me to the moon with it. Like I was I was off to the races. Could you talk a little bit about how that happened? Like why did you put these in there? What does it do from your perspective in this whole section describing what Rocket Club is?
So Greta Thunberg, young climate activist, was one of the kind of core inspirations for the game, thinking of it as really the core as an allegory for climate change. Around the time that I was writing it, there was a lot in the news of youth climate strikes, and this feeling of a big problem that is just dropped on the youth of who have to deal with it, who have to deal with the catastrophe that comes of it, and adults aren't willing to make the changes that need to be made. So I think that was part of why middle schoolers, or why kids at least, that here there is a problem that is definitely out of scale to the people who have to handle it. So it is an interesting age group, I think, and I think people maybe from talking to people, they've said like this kind of like an odd, like a weird group of people to play, to like have characters. Like I think we're more comfortable with teenagers because they're I don't know, I guess a little closer to being adults, or we imagine them more as adults. But middle school is this like liminal age where you're not really a kid anymore. You're not quite a teen yet. I mean, even if you are a teen in number.
Right.
But there's also like, you have this creativity and excitement of childhood kind of sticking around, while also recognizing a bit more of the world and like feeling the weight of the future and what's coming for you. So I think it's an interesting age for that reason. There's so this is jumping into a different anecdote, but a while back I judged a grade school art contest, just like the PTA organized or whatever, and it was like kindergarten up through seniors in high school, separated by age group, and I like went through and picked out like what the best ones were on these tables. But you could see this change of like elementary school kids playing and like being imaginative. In middle school, they've got that imagination and also developing some skill, like some pretty cool artworks. And then in the teenage years, they've got the skill, they're kind of repeating the skill, and the imagination is gone. Like they don't want to show that part of themselves. Not that they don't have it, but like it's self-conscious. So like that there's like a freedom that's lost there. That's something that I constantly thought about in thinking about this game and in writing this game, is that like special moment. And also, and I say this in the book, but I think it's important to take the characters seriously as people. Like they're kids, but they're people. They're human beings. They have complex backstories and emotions, and they're complicated characters still. While you can also have fun with being a dumb little kid sometimes too.
Well, both things are true. Sometimes we're dumb little adults. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like,
more often than not, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of room for these things. I think taking the kids seriously is a very important thing. My impression, for what it's worth, is the comfort that people have with teenagers might also be acculturated to some degree. But like we have a lot of stories in popular media about teenagers, including in a wide variety of contexts, lots of danger. Middle school gets overlooked a lot because it kind of, to your point about like, oh, teen is in the name sometimes, like they kind of get lumped in, but then not lumped in. They kind of get looked over. And then there's lots of childhood stories. But this liminal space, part of what I found compelling about the opportunity to tell stories in it is exactly what you were just articulating, coupled with that idea that like it is a little bit overlooked sometimes, right? While being this unique moment in life in the way that you describe, I've been thinking a lot in a way that also parallels like TTRPGs as an art form and actual plays as an art form. I think a lot about like why tell stories this way. What not just for this. I mean, like for everything I do, because with my background in other forms of storytelling, I'll think about like, why is this a play and not a movie? Why is it a movie and not a TV show? Why is it? You know what I mean? Like these things matter. The decisions matter. The structure matters to what you're trying to achieve, how you're able to achieve it, what's available to you, how it's received, all these things. Same thing when it comes to actual play, right? And I think a lot about what we're doing at the level of the fiction, and then what we're doing at the above table level that's still on camera, right? That is a part of what people are taking in this process. I want to talk a bit about that throughout what we talk about here, because you've built an incredible structure here for collaborative play. Really great scaffolding that also leaves a lot of really important negative space. And I've been thinking a lot about negative space and game design writ large, partially as I develop my own preferences for that further. And I think a big part of what draws me so heavily to your game here is precisely its use of, like, its balance of negative space and scaffolding, as well as what I want to bring back to what we were just talking about with middle schoolers and taking them seriously in this liminal moment as they emerge into the world. from a state of less responsibility to a state of at least more responsibility, as they are also understanding a bit more about the broadness, wideness, and depth of the world, and unfortunately, more often than not, confronted with the reality of, oh, no, we have to do things because other people aren't going to do them. And also, all these people we thought might have it together don't. And they are maybe causing the problems, sometimes definitely causing the problems, or causing different problems while ignoring these problems. All of that explodes. I mean, sometimes, it varies by person, right? You can experience lots of that earlier, but it explodes for a lot of people at that time in life. So it has this interesting parallel to me with the art form, right? Because I was talking to somebody else about this, so I don't want to take credit for this insight. Agency and consequence being at the heart of this art form, and collaboration as like a wrapper is a pretty reasonable distillation, I'm finding, of what I find, at least in TTRPGs, compelling. Like, why tell a story here? It's a story that allows centering of an active engagement with agency and consequence as two sides of the same coin in a way that other forms of telling stories don't. And then it's a collaborative engine. I'd argue it can also be like an empathy engine potentially, and that sort of thing. But what it definitely does is you don't make it, even if you make it solo, even if you're doing a solo mode of a game or a solo game, you're not doing that alone, because you're in conversation with the author of the game.
Right.
Yeah. There's a collaboration baked in.
Whatever kind of randomness engine is put into a game also becomes like an important player at the table.
Yeah.
The dice making decisions that you maybe wouldn't make.
Yeah, well, and the math, the likelihood of this, that, or the other thing does help shape human behavior, right? Mm-hmm. Even if we are still making the decisions at the table, but we're not making them in a vacuum. We're making them in conversation with those design decisions, right? So when we get a little bit more into the mechanics, especially the core 3D 6-bit everything about the design, I'd love to discuss that further. And I hope we're going to have time to talk about the Alien Threat Maker, because I will say it's very fun playing with you, Em. Through the Alien Threat Maker, you've made a very cool oracle that I deeply love using.
I love the Alien Threat Maker too. I'll play it by myself sometimes, just for
right.
Nothing. Yeah,
exactly. It's so compelling, and it's like I got to do something with it. Legitimately, this is me sharing. This, but this is me sharing this with the audience. You were kind enough to share with me the Alien Threat Maker for open play, like for closed play testing. Back in like August of 2025, I was so enamored with the process that the 3 alien threat pulls that I did, like the 3 processes, are the basis for 3 of the 4 alien threats in the 4 APs that I ran for this so far. That's how much it was like when we ended up later, and we'll get to this, but like when we ended up later talking about, making the actual plays and all that. Part of how I immediately got to like, I want to do this multi-channel anthology was like, I want to pick, I want to do all of these. And I got to, and then I got to also do new pulls for the 4th show, which was Radical Resonance. So just so everybody at home knows, if you haven't picked it up yet, that is how much fun the Alien Threat Maker is that it lived in my mind for like 6 months after I did it. And I was like, and when the opportunity came up to do this, I was like, oh, yeah, that. I'm going to do that. But also I want to do the Alien Threat Maker pulling again. So I'm going to do another one too. It wasn't obviously just for those reasons, but that was something I was very excited about with it that helped me come to that. Before we dive into all that, and before we transition into conversations of mechanics, which I would love to use the 1-page version of the game as a bridge to get to, I do have one other sort of table setting question. This has been an open playtest period that just finished. That it's kind of 2 questions. I'm sorry because I'm cheating a little bit on that, but we take them one at a time. I'll let you know the overall, and we can go whatever order you'd like. The open playtest period is a unique experience, right? It goes out into the wild. All the people who sign up to do this are self-selecting into signing up to do this. typically are going to be people who have a stated interest in doing that for X, Y, or Z reason, bringing their own lived experiences and their own assumptions and wants as well as needs to the table, their own subjectivity, right? And engaging with it in a wide variety of ways, right? The game then largely speaks for itself, although you were kind enough to be in conversation with people who were in the open playtest as a resource, and that was huge and super helpful, not just for me for what I was doing with the APs, but I saw with other people in the community who were in the Discord talking about that. At the same time, this open playtest was made possible, structurally speaking, by the publisher of the game, Evil Hat, who you're able to connect up with to develop the game, continue developing the game past this point until it's ready to be put out officially, right? People are going to want to know about that, right? Like, Evil Hat is a cool, incredibly important publisher in the space. Connecting up with them is a big deal on its own. And that they have believed in this game so much to support its development up to the point of open playtesting, provide the open playtest, and now will continue to support through the eventual publication of the game, is something people would love to hear more about. So I'd like to invite you to talk however you'd like, get into whatever you'd like preliminarily, about both the relationship with Evil Hat, how that came to be, what that's been like, what your takeaways are, what you might want other people to know who might want to do similar things. And then also specifically the open playtest. What does that feel like? Because it can feel like a vulnerable thing to like share your art, right? To send it out into the world and it's not in your control anymore. And people are going to do things with it. And what are they going to think? And all that. Wherever you want to start with that. Evil Hat or the open playtest, the floor is yours.
Yeah. I'll say, first of all, Evil Hat is just an amazing company to work with. They're a small company. They absolutely love games and design and are like wholeheartedly behind the creators and helping to make a good product. I ended up working with them. So I'd started expanding the game because, one, it's another challenge. Like, I'd made a bunch of one-page RPGs. Like, what happens if I try to dig into this more? And it was Rocket Club because I loved Rocket Club. I loved playing it, and I wanted to dig into more detail from it. So I spent some time expanding that into a more full game kind of book. At some point, I was just cruising Evil Hat's website and saw that they accept unsolicited proposals, basically. And I was like, sure, why not? And I just sent it in. I cleaned it up a little bit more from where it was, tried to get it to where like I felt like it was ready to go. I think it still wasn't quite up to what their requirements were for their listed requirements for submitting something, but I got it close and sent it in. And personally, huge fan of Evil Hat's games in general at that point. It was seemed like a ridiculous dream of like maybe Evil Hat would publish my game. Yeah, right. But why not? And like, advice for creators, go for it. Like, if the worst that's going to happen is nothing, then do it. So send it in, and fairly quickly, like a few weeks, a month maybe after just sending it, got a message, and they were like, will you run this for us? Can we play test it? So arranged that, set up a play test, like a one shot with some of the core people at the company, and ran through it. And they were like, okay, well, we'll get back to you, and we'll see what happens. So they replied with a list of suggestions. They were like, here's some things we liked about the game, here's some things that we think could be improved, some things that we didn't quite get, some things that were, one of the things was like, it wasn't really, I think the identity of the game wasn't entirely clear yet. Like what is this? What makes this unique? I think something that was said was like, is it kids on bikes with rockets? Or like, yeah, it's not.
No, it's not. It's definitely not. Yeah.
If you want to address these things, send it back to us in a year. Hold on just a second.
Yeah, no worries. Take your time.
Sorry.
Don't worry about it. So you're saying if you want to address these things, send it back to us in a year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I did. It was like, do some work on it, test it some more, and then come back to us and we'll take a look again. No promises, just that's the process. So I did a year later, so I think a little bit more than that, sent it into them again. And they were like, let's run another test, which we did. And they came back with some more notes. And I mean, like at this point, I'm still like, wow, it's really cool that they're giving me notes on this game. Like they're not going to publish it, but it's very cool that they're like generous enough to like respond to this and tell me what they think about it. Which, like, I mean, folks out there, if you do submit to them, maybe that's what you get out of it, and that's like still a great thing to get from it. And I had reached a point where it was like, maybe this will happen with Evil Hat, and maybe I'm just gonna like self-publish and send it out there and see what happens. But I guess it was February of last year. They came back and said, we want to do this. Like, that's
awesome. And at that point, it had been a couple of years overall of discussions with them.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I think that's important context, because for people to get a sense at home, right? Like if they want to do this, anchoring yourself in an understanding that like the timeline can feel a little bit long on the front end. But I will say, on the back end, at the point that you're at right now, I don't want to speak for you, but like you're here already. Do you know what I mean? Like you did it, and now you're finished. You just finished the open playtest period. You're gathering together the last of those notes. How does that feel?
It's good. You had asked like, is there a vulnerability in putting the work out there like that? And there wasn't so much with this. I think. I mean, and also in the intervening year, like there's been a lot of work done to get the game to the point where it is. Evil Hat set up a design consultation with Avery Alder, who did like seriously deep dive into like reading everything. That was vulnerable for sure. Particularly since the game was at a state where it needed that. It's grown and changed and really gotten cleaned up, and I came into the playtest feeling pretty confident about it.
Good. I gotta say that to whatever extent you're willing to unpack that further, what a wonderful thing for Evil Hat to have done, to have somebody like Avery Alder come in to pay that much attention. Like what a vote of confidence there, that they were taking the game seriously enough to put that in, given how fundamental Avery Alder's work has been to the indie TTRPG space. Are you, again, whatever you're comfortable getting into, but what would you be able to share about that process, especially given the vulnerability you mentioned of like, it's tough, this person knows what they're talking about a lot and they're paying a lot of attention. What could you share with us about that?
I think the biggest thing that experience did for me and for the game was brought focus to what I want the game to be, which is collaborative, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more, leaning into player agency, because there were there had been a long process of kind of adding things, like put this in the game and put this in the game and put this in the game, and it was at a point where things needed to be cut a lot. And she was really great at pointing out, this right here is not going to be fun for the player. Like, why is this a thing that only the guide is going to decide? Like, and kind of like keyed in on those places of like what's not working, and really refocused me into like cleaning that up with that idea of trusting the player, creating something really collaborative, and designing all of the mechanics and all of the text to fit with that. Also really great with organization of like, don't reference something that you haven't explained yet, and this whole structure of the book.
That's huge, because I will say, for a relatively long text, 172 pages, it's extremely easy to navigate. That's not just my opinion. Yeah, like it came up in the Rocket Club talk, like the Radical Resonance talkback. But it was my experience with all the tables that I've played this with, for whatever that's worth. It's still anecdotal at scale, but like consistently, it's very easy to find stuff. I mean, for one thing, just even formally speaking, the fact that it's hyperlinked and stuff is very helpful. But within it, just reading it straight through, one thing flows into the next really easily. From a guide perspective, I find that it's very easy to know, like, hey, I just do this in this order, and it's where I need it to be, because not every book is like that, right? Yeah. I'm not dunking on anybody, but like, sometimes you have to jump around. Yes. I didn't really have to jump around, is what I'm saying. Like, I understood, like, this is the order it's presented to me in, and this is generally speaking, the order in which I need to do things to be able to put this up on its feet, right?
Well, to a large degree, you have Avery to thank for that.
Thank you, Avery, because it's spectacular. If you watch this, I love it, and I love the agency piece. We will get into that more. The players could not have been more over the moon at the tables that I ran about the agency that they had. Not just in active gameplay with regard to the core game loop and the primary sessions we played, but also the agency that they had during the prep process, right? And the co-creation process ahead of those sessions. And they really enthusiastically embraced the more challenging elements of the game through that agency. I really want to highlight something you said, because it's a big thing for me individually. I am a big fan of games trusting the people playing them. I'm a big fan of designers not designing from a place of fear, right? In terms of being afraid of, like, what's the player going to do with this? If a person is going to act in bad faith, I don't think we should be designing around that, right? Yeah. Is my I'm not a designer, but like is my 2 cents. I think of it the same way when I'm facilitating at the table. I'm not going to set policy to the squeakiest wheel bad actor. They're not going to be at the table. Do you know what I mean? Like, is my answer. Exactly. Like, they just don't get to be there. Because then everybody else at the table who does deserve that trust and is acting in good faith is able to achieve so much more together. When you trust that.
There were bits in the earlier version of the game that were like, the guide has final say in this, or like determined by the guide alone, and it was like, why? Right. What's right. The need to say that? Like, let the player decide.
Yeah. Well, so that goes back to agency and consequence. This is in my mind a lot, both because of Rocket Club and because of the next 2 big projects that I'm doing, right? One of which I've also started a discussion, to be completely transparent, with the designer of the game. So I'm talking game design with that person too. And it's funny to me how these 2 things live in conversation with each other in my mind, but also, like, even though I don't think either of you are aware of each other's games, right? But like, at the level of design,
I know it because you've mentioned it.
Because I've told you about it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's incredibly interesting because it does deal with that negative space, and it does deal with that agency and consequence, right? And we're going to see that when we talk more about the mechanics, which we'll transition into now through the one page, because I want to go back to that. But consistently, for example, the reason why I found, I've said this elsewhere, reason that I ascribed upon reflection to why I found that most of the people in the games that I ran didn't embrace catastrophe was because they didn't want to do things that would hurt their friends, right? They understood the agency coming with responsibility in a way that parallels a middle schooler's emergent understanding of how their agency comes with responsibility. Oh, I can do things. Oh no, I can do things.
Yes, I have to decide which things to do now.
Yeah, and I'm responsible then for what happens after I do the thing, right? Even if I didn't mean for that outcome to happen, that doesn't stop me from being responsible for the impact of my actions. That is profound. And the fact that you put that into this system, specifically in the context of middle schoolers, and middle schoolers facing a seemingly insurmountable obstacle, right? Something that feels so huge compared to what you have yourself. I also like what you can do yourself. I also really want to highlight here something that struck me about that. I don't know if this was a conscious decision or not, but a lot of times the stories that I play in the TTRPG space that deal with a lot of these big ideas, right? Big philosophical ideas about life and the nature of existence, and what is knowable and facing the unknown, which I individually find very compelling. Live in a Lovecraftian world, right? Lovecraft was a piece of shit, right? Like as a human. So you're always navigating that, right? Like when you're dealing with that, playing Call of Cthulhu or anything inspired by it, it's like, okay, dealing with these eldritch horrors, with these unknowable things, these things that, and also like baggage around questions of like how you represent and manifest in a gamified context. Things like mental health crises, right? Or anything dealing with mental health, because a lot of times that's been done poorly in the past, right? And in relation to Lovecraft, here you sidestep, from my perspective, all of those problems very deftly by creating an alien invasion context that can include some of that. Because, like, to be completely clear, at a minimum in A Fractured Sky, what we dealt with, which came directly from the alien threat maker at a seed level, right? Like that question of the prismatic stuff and all that, and a little bit of that unknowability, it's in the Oracle, right? I interpreted past that, but it was in what you gave me. So you put that in the story, right? Through the Oracle. That is, in some sense, broadly speaking, Lovecraftian, right? But not reductively so, not in a way that carries the baggage of Lovecraft, because you've taken it out of that context, right? Same thing with mental health or any kind of health thing, disability stuff. One of our players who's a disability advocate in Silent Harvest played a character with a disability that came into play in profound and meaningful ways in the game, that the game supported, and that also reflected decisions that were made with enthusiastic consent at the table. The way you deal with conditions and the way that you lean into player agency when it comes to those conditions, that the only way that a condition can be applied is for that player to decide what that condition is and then describe it, not just from a pick list. And there's nothing wrong with there being pick lists. There's lots of great games that have pick lists for that, for specific design reasons that are also cool in their context. But I really appreciated that it wasn't a pick list in this situation, because to quote somebody else's feedback, Jilly, in Silent Harvest, in the talk back for that, Jilly is like a word nerd, is what she said about herself, right? And I vibe, because hardcore word nerd over here too, right? And fully, what a gift to be able to get in there and be like, I get to describe this as anything. I get to this gets to be as specific as I want it to be, and it does what it needs to do. so empowering, also in a way that then gives the responsibility, again, agency responsibility, right? Agency consequence to the players to be like, okay, if I'm going to represent something about the mental or emotional health of this character deteriorating or being damaged in some momentary or in temporary sense, I need to think about what I want that to be here, and it is going to be up to me how well I handle that, right? Because you can't possibly at a design level account for everybody's everything. Do you know what I mean? You can create a context for us to do stuff, then we're going to take it into the world and we're going to do a million things that you could have never thought of, because that's how people are, right? I'd love to hear you talk more about the design decisions related both to the alien threat, specifically in the context I was talking about like making metaphorical the unknown, like making literal, but through metaphor, the unknown and these large threats like what you were mentioning with climate change. And then also about the use of tricky things like mental health or physical health and physical disability through conditions and giving player agency for that.
Yeah, there's probably I think those will end up being tied together by the time I end up finish talking and figure out what that moment is. But for one thing, I think Lovecraft is probably hard to avoid entirely, just because that kind of storytelling has influenced so many other things. I was never a huge Lovecraft fan, but I love Alien, and that definitely comes into the game. There are tentacles. It's hard to avoid entirely, and I didn't really try to avoid it entirely, but yeah, it's tough having like such a hugely influential thing be created by such a piece of garbage. And the alien threat maker, what I wanted was, I think this is where the two things come together. It's words. It's not, the alien threat maker isn't giving you like, this is a gray-skinned alien with a big head and bulging eyes. It's giving you just a couple of words to, sometimes a little bit of a bigger framework of it being a horror or a deceiver or something like that, but a couple of words to put together and make of that what you will. Where you could draw the same two cards to describe the alien, and two people would come up with a completely different thing from it. And with conditions, I think there's like a similar play of like what word am I adding or phrase am I adding to my character to describe them. And something I noticed in your games specifically, and maybe I didn't pay that much attention in my own, but more often than not, players chose, I guess, so here's winding it back just a little bit, like one of the things that goes on there is there's a lot of stuff that can happen in an instant in trying to do something. Like there's a lot of different ways that you could be hurt. And I like opening that up to the player to say, like, what are we focusing on? Is it you cutting your hand, or is it you having a panic attack, or feeling tired? Like there's so many facets to that, and it's sort of like what is the camera focusing on, kind of. But the thing I noticed is that like more often, like I think by a large degree, players chose emotional and mental conditions. Like there's very little of like bruised or like twisted ankle or something like that. So it's interesting to see in action players picking things that are like, I guess, a little bit more core to who their player is. Like it's a twisted ankle could happen to anyone, but the panic or the confusion is something that's more special to that particular character, maybe.
Well, and I think the framework you give us also with the core roles and with the concern of the game. I mean, again, the logline for the game here is saying Rocket Club is a game of precocious, rocket-obsessed middle schoolers facing dangerous alien invasion while grappling with their own volatile emotions. It ends on volatile emotions, right? So I feel like that context also likely creates a framework, even if subconsciously for players, where like what I feel matters a lot. Right, what I feel is what this character feels matters a lot. And I love what you just said about focusing in the camera on where it wants to be collaboratively, right? What you water grows is a phrase I use a lot when preparing for these games, when doing session zeros with folks, and again in a context of agency and consequence, right? What you water grows. If you pay attention to something, so do I. Right? If you tell me something matters to you, same here. You know, like I will go where you point me as the guide, right? Which is funny to say I'm the guide and you're right, but that's how that works, right? Like it's a flat hierarchy that I appreciate, at least in the way that I approached it, and I think it's baked in. It feels baked into me. That I really love there, because again, in terms of dealing with more complex stuff. And again, in the context of playing kids, because a lot of people will feel a certain way about it given the age of these player characters, right? Or they may think they will on the way in and then need to unpack it more to understand how to safely approach it, right? These are middle schoolers facing an alien threat. It says it very eloquently in the book, and I'd love for you to speak about it a little bit if you'd like. To set the stage for that, the book specifically explicitly states that from a safety perspective, if you don't want to have the kids experience physical harm, they don't have to. But there are harms, right? There's still mental and emotional stuff. The conditions continue to be a part of the core game design. You can't really play the game. I mean, you tell me if you disagree with that, obviously, as the creator of the game. But my experience of it would be like, you're not really playing the game if you're not taking conditions. And if you don't, a lot of what I tell people in the session zeros for this and other things is, if they, I'm a big fan of everybody above table, right? Like it's always collaboration above table. I'm not a fan of facilitator player friction, right? In an above table sense. And I don't like the term player versus player because I don't think it's accurately descriptive, at least not in a TTRPG context. I think it's always, if it occurs, character versus character. And like everything else in life requires enthusiastic consent. But character versus character can be very fruitful, right? Whether that be instrumentalized and made mechanical, or simply be at the level of the free play that is role play, right? That can be great. You have to have a lot of clear communication and collaboration on like above table to make it very, very clear and safe and consistently reinforce that everybody is overtly, deliberately committed to moving in the same direction, right? To wanting the same thing and being fans of each other. That includes the guide. The guide is another player at the table. So I root for them. When I put people in these horrifying contexts, right? In these horror games, which I played this one like a horror game a lot, right? In a lot of situations. I do it wanting them to kick the shit out of the things I'm putting in front of them, right? Or if not kick the shit, befriend or whatever. Like I want them to succeed. Yes. And I believe in them enough that I'm not pulling punches on that. I am attending to the lines and veils so that we're attending to everybody's safety fully and comprehensively. But that is a different thing than not providing them with consequence. And so that's something I'd love to hear more about when it comes to establishing safety with middle schoolers in this context, knowing how people react often, the general idea of harm to children, because that, I imagine, was a difficult nut to crack in terms of how to articulate it, not at the table. At the table, I actually feel like it's pretty easy to establish in conversation. But at the level of what you wrote, right, for people to receive not in conversation with you outside of that, what are you interested in sharing about that?
I can tell you why it was not hard to write. And people watching, you can dig into the Streaming Rainbow back catalog for this, but I was super inspired by a game that Cameron ran I don't know when this was, and right now I'm drawing a blank on actually what the title was, but it was a 2-person game that jumped into these kind of different worlds. It was part of the Phantasmagoria. We'll have Eli put up a link to it, but but there was one, so they jumped from into the embodying different characters, and in one of the games, the Cameron and the other player is a collaborative game. We're playing children, and they talked through at the start their safety concerns about being children, and landed on our characters are not going to get physically hurt. We don't want to see that in the game. That doesn't and went into why that doesn't blunt the edge of the game. One, the characters don't know that they're not going to get hurt, and there are other bad things that can happen aside from being physically injured. Maybe worse things in that game. Definitely worse things.
I'd argue in general, do you know what I mean? Going back to the question of volatile emotions and how sometimes they feel bigger than the alien threat, is a sprained ankle really worse than emotional devastation? I don't know. Probably not, right? It's at least different.
I will say from a mechanical standpoint, the conditions, when they apply to what you're doing, can reduce your number of rerolls. Being overwhelmed or freaked out or something is probably going to hit that more often than having a twisted ankle would. So
100%. Andy in Radical Resonance, who played Maxime, was frantic, I think was what they had, and for a few episodes it was all the time, every roll it was going in there, or I think it might have been Marisol, played by Green, it was had tunnel vision at one point. I think a couple people had tunnel vision, was impacting boom boom over and over again until they dealt with that, which I think is really cool too. And I also want to highlight for the people listening or watching, rest and care is such a great example of you trusting the players, right? Because I feel like a lot of designers might be tempted to hyper mechanize rest and care. If you're very D&D brained about it, right, in a broad sense, it becomes a thing of but you have to make them do a short rest or a long rest. Do you know what I mean? If they have to go sit and do a thing, and there has to be a mechanic, otherwise they'll spam it, they'll abuse it, right? Rest and care is such an elegant, beautiful example of trust, from my perspective, because my understanding of it is that you just narratively engage with a moment of rest and care with another player, and that being related in a way that narratively makes sense to your condition clears the condition. And notably, in clearing the condition, it's not like the condition magically doesn't exist anymore. If you have a broken arm, your arm's probably still broken. It just stops hindering your ability to do the things it was hindering your ability to do.
It's kind of going back to that idea of where the camera is focused. It's just not important to the story anymore. Right, because it's not stopping your character. From an embodied perspective, from the role play perspective of the players, what a great way to anchor their motivations in a moment through game design, still leaving ample negative space for them to determine it, but giving them guidance, right? To okay, because again, this is a game, some of the talkbacks talked about the power of friendship and what have you. Yes is the thing, actually. And at the level of game design, I love how the collaborative structure of what you set up parallels the existence of that in story in a way where those two things, I found, just support each other consistently, emphasize each other, and work really well together in a bit of a virtuous cycle, because everybody at the table working together to make this place together, to make this club together, and then to achieve everything that they're doing, does show that they're stronger together than alone.
their
Right.
ability to advance through the confession of secrets, their ability to clear conditions through the use of rest and care, puts at the level of design incentives that are not overly instrumentalized, because rest and care is a little bit of an instrument, but not really. Like, it's mostly, I would argue, from my perspective, mostly free play, right? That's so cool, right? Because you're still communicating, hey, this is a game that says you're better together. So if you decide to be alone, you can do that. If you decide to not let people in, you can do that. You don't confess your secret, you can't take an advancement. You don't do rest and care, eventually you're going to get enough conditions to crash out. And if you've crashed out and you don't do rest and care, you're going to stay crashed out and you can't take an action, right? Those are firm design opinions, but they leave a lot of room and a lot of agency still at the table. So I'd love for you to talk about your thought process behind them, how that felt from your perspective, and then what it's been like to see people engage with that.
Yeah, I mean, the game has always been Rocket Club, so it's always been about community. That, like, this isn't a game where a bunch of strangers meet up at the pub and like have to go on a quest. Like, you're already the Rocket Club. So a lot of those design decisions were about incentivizing moments of connection between the characters. And I mean, also with the core of the game being about emotion and community, like, these are moments that I like to see in the actual plays for sure, but in my own playtests of the game, I always love the moments of sharing a secret. And I guess similar, that's also free play. Like, it's a thing that's prescribed to happen. You share your secret. The other person doesn't have to support you, but there's incentive there for them to support you. And there's so many ways that I've just seen that played out, where of the confession of the secret and just like beautiful moments of support. That is just, it's just one of my favorite parts of the game. Usually there's no aliens around at that point. You're not rolling anything. It's just really free role play. And similar, I guess in a smaller way with the clearing of conditions, it's really just a way, again, of incentivizing that, just a little quiet moment between two characters of wrapping a bandage around someone's arm, or just talking them down a little bit and giving a little bit of support. And like, it could be 2 minutes and then you clear your condition. And that's I'm thinking about also opening that up to NPCs.
Yeah, I will say, for whatever that's worth, from my experiences with it, it may be a good idea, because here's what I'll say about that. Rest and care as a mechanism through which we're modeling real world behavior that allows one to manage these kinds of conditions, be it a moment to tend to a physical injury, or a moment to tend to one's mental and emotional state, right? In a healthy way. I love that it incentivizes connection with other people. The fact, and I'd say it's an interesting thing too, because it also came up with secrets, right? And I don't know exactly what the answer is to this. I love that secrets should primarily be shared between PCs. So to be fully clear about this, I like that. I like it staying. There was an example, for example, in Neon Crossfire, where a character was confessing a secret and primarily wanted to confess it to their sister, who was an NPC. There were other people in the car, and they could choose somebody else there to be the one to provide their support and then complete the loop as designed. But there are going to be situations with that, and with rest and care, where people want to have that with somebody played by the guide, right? What do you think about that?
Yeah, there's for one, secrets being a key to advance has been a part of the game forever. And uh, there, it's definitely, I have seen in playtesting it like complicated situations, and I can imagine a lot of situations. Maybe there needs to be a little more written guidance around that. I feel like for the advance, it still has to be between two player characters.
100%. Yeah.
But, and I think it's written in the book. There have been so many drafts, but I want to make it clear that like your secret might not even be a secret anymore when you confess it. Like the characters might know.
Right.
Going to the Neon Crossfire confession that you're talking about, it could have been like, well, yeah, I mean, we knew all along.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was obvious.
Yeah.
And you have our, and like, we love you. It could have been that. So I think it's more about the kind of unloading of the secret, and I feel like it works in that context of you're in a car full of people and you tell a particular person, but then someone else supports you.
100%. It felt good to me at the time, but also this insight is really important for people to hear, right? Because yes, it's about the act of owning your secret, not letting your secret own you. Maybe is a way that I would put that, right? Like that you are taking the moment to choose to share this is the thing that I understand as please correct me if I'm wrong, as the impetus for the advancement, right? And then the support obviously is like, hey, you're stepping up for your friend, so that's why you get a minor advancement off of that, because you're also stepping into this moment and using your agency for the sake of good in the community, right?
Yeah. I feel like the way it was played in that instance was entirely like as written. Though I intend to look and see if I need to write more about that. Yeah, I mean, it could also be like in that car ride, he tells the sister, and then later like pulls a friend aside and is like, hey, this is what I was feeling and why I felt I couldn't tell you, and like that becomes the moment. It was a one shot, so like it's hard to really give space for that kind of thing. I'm glad someone actually like confessed their secret in that.
Well, I wanted to make it possible in a one shot to do that, and this is actually something that might be interesting to talk about. I don't know if we want to get into it now or later, but about like different modes of play for this, like in a one shot versus in a short run, like few handful of sessions, versus in something longer running, or even especially for people playing at home rather than an actual play context, ongoing, right? Because there's nothing about this that stops you from running an ongoing campaign for however long you'd like, right? What I ended up doing on my side was just telling everybody to take some of their experience track and fill it up before we started, right? Because getting to a secret confession in a single session, it's not the most likely thing in the world that people are going to fill 5, right, in one session, especially when there's 5 players. Like, just the economy of that is hard to manage because there's too many different people rolling. You're not going to get enough rolls to do that. The likelihood of it rolling in the way that it needs to for you to get the experience, even if you're kind of XP farming, not likely. And you don't want to have the pressure.
Even when you do fill it up, finding the moment to like narratively
to do it. Because a lot of that, more than one of these campaigns had people carry over their secret more than one session where they weren't gaining any XP. And I want to go back to this a second, because I think that's a good example of this. And I wanted to bring up something about incentives, right? Because we're talking about incentives and incentivizing like community play and things like that, like focusing on being better together. Multiple times I saw players overtly, deliberately choose to leave incentives on the table for the sake of story, right? So that would happen sometimes, and I believe that this is partially, at least partially, maybe fully baked in, right? The main example I'll give there is to how it's baked in initially is mood, and specifically impulse or question, and specifically with impulse, do you embrace it and gain experience, or do you choose not to embrace it? And the only penalty for not embracing it is you don't gain experience. There's no negative. You don't like take a condition for not embracing it, right? Which a different design decision could have done. You offer a carrot, and then if they don't want the carrot, they don't take the carrot.
Right.
But there's no stick, right? And I think that's really cool, and something I'd like to talk a little bit more about in the context of what we're talking about broadly, but also specifically with what we just went through. Because there's a conversation I've seen come up a lot in the indie TTRPG design space, right? Again, I'm not a designer, but I do have some interest in it. And so selfishly, I come into these conversations and I look at those sorts of things as somebody who like, okay, if I want to make a game, what do I want to do? And why do I want to do it? And even just as somebody who plays it, like understanding and who tells stories through it, understanding how this functions, why it functions that way, being deliberate about those decisions, the implementation of that. So one of the things I think about a lot, because of my own politics in real life and my own worldview, is I want to tell stories. I think telling stories about building community and about building a better world together, even if incrementally, even if in a sense where like you can't just push a button and the alien invasion's over. Do you know what I mean? Like that's not how climate change works, right? That's not how. So like that's another thing I find really compelling about this that we'll get into. But I find it interesting, the question of how do you build in an opinion, right? How do you build in a worldview to whatever extent you do, right? How do you, to put it differently, how do you describe clearly or communicate what a game cares about and doesn't care about? Where it leaves negative design space for you to bring things in, and where it makes deliberate decisions on like, this is something that I care about. This is what it means to play this game. And then within that, the question of incentivizing ethical behavior, right? Because like some people argue, you incentivize ethical behavior, it negates to some degree the intrinsic value of the ethical behavior, because you want them to do it for intrinsic reasons, not for min-maxy reasons, right? Here's where I want to land the plane on this prompt for you to reply. The min-maxy thing isn't a concern for me at all playing Rocket Club. It's not a concern for me as a person in general, but like it's not a concern at a design level when I look at Rocket Club, in part because having put it on its feet, people don't, right? Like there's already enough, aside from people maybe just not doing that as much as one might assume, because you put in the carrot but not the stick in that kind of situation, right? Because what happens with waiting for the right moment to confess a secret in narrative just means you don't accrue more XP, but it doesn't harm you, right? You are communicating, this is something that the game cares about. If you're playing this game, it's a game that is overtly, deliberately set up for community to come together and achieve things together that they can't achieve apart, or can achieve the same way or as easily apart. But you're still leaving room, agency, and consequence, right? For at the table, people to make the decision, hey, you know what? I saw it happen so many times, and every time I saw it happen, I loved it. You know what? I'm not going to embrace my impulse because I don't want to do that to my friends. Or I'm not going to embrace my impulse because it doesn't make sense for my character right now. And they just leave it there. I'd love to hear you say more about it.
Yeah. First of all, not quite responding to the question, but since we're talking about the impulses and questions and mood, again, Evil Hat was so helpful in making that aspect of the game work as well as it works right now, because it had been an ongoing problem of like, what does the mood die do exactly? It's always been there, but like, and one of their initial concerns was like, this needs to have weight and it needs to be considered equal with the other two dice that you're rolling. And I got to a place where it was a total mess. It was like kind of interesting, but it took like 5 to 10 minutes to resolve a roll, and it was complicated and didn't make sense. And I was like, I reached out to them and was like, I don't know what to do. And Sean Nittner, the head of productions there, and Fred, the president of Evil Hat, like scheduled a call with me, and like we spent an hour talking through like a whole bunch of different possibilities, and eventually, like, I think we had like 5 things that were pretty good, and then I took that and combined all of them together almost, and made what it is right now. But to your point, I think so the impulses, yeah, I mean, I think the impulses are designed to make that emotion matter, in that it's like urging you to do something, so it's like complicating the story, and that's why there's that incentive to get an XP for like following through with that, focusing on that mood and what it's doing and what your character wants to do. But I think it's narratively equally satisfying to deny it, because then in the story, like, that's something that your character wanted to do and then didn't. So there's still an interesting, from a storytelling perspective, a choice being made there. And yeah, it happens all the time. I also like it when players like lean into that and explain like how they're not doing it, but it doesn't always happen. But I find it interesting both ways. And yeah, like you said, I mean, the heart of the game is emotion and growth by supporting each other. So that's where those little bits of experience come from, to kind of grow.
But because they're not punitive, right? Yeah. Because that form of incentivizing is an invitation, but not like some people who maybe are a little min-max brained might be like, no, but I want my XP, right? But I don't think that's something that needs to be designed around. Do you know what I mean? Like, that person will experience this game that way and then also see other people not doing that and putting like the narrative reality first, and also having, again, agency consequence, right? Like the consequence of embracing your impulse in a way that gives primacy to the XP farming over the narrative will have narrative consequence, right? At the table, and will naturally, in my view, through that process, with everybody engaging with it in good faith, resolve itself, right? Essentially in a way that I think works really well for what the game seems to have an opinion on, at least in my reading of it, which is, if you're making a lot of self-interested decisions rather than accounting for the other people around you, the world will shape itself around you accordingly. People will react to you accordingly. And then if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do, but that's also what's going to lead to what everybody else does, right?
With the secrets, I also don't think it's bad to like go ahead and get the XP of, like, if you listen to the last episode of Centrifuge, secrets are dealt with in a lot of different ways there. Like David's character and Sarah's character engaged in this battle and like destroyed a robot, and then David's character is just like, okay, I gotta tell you something right now, and like that's not it. Like it works. Your kid's in an intense situation, you think you might die, like shout the secret out, why not? Even if it has nothing to do with what's going on. I think that's still,
you just want to be seen in a moment, right? Or you want like a catharsis. He
was playing a magpie who like couldn't shut up anyway, so I think it fit the character too. So, but it was like, that was as satisfying, I think, in a story as like waiting until everything cools down and you have a quiet moment together. Like, I mean, I think like if you want to XP farm and like go for it and get the XP, and like still like it's not like getting that advance also isn't part of the story. Like your character is changing, you're like getting another ability or something, and that's I think that's totally valid. I don't know that there is a way to min-max.
I agree. I think it depends on what, I think it's a concern from a different context that doesn't really apply here. Because also, look, to that point, you didn't overly instrumentalize things in the sense that like there aren't levels, right? You're not advancing from level 1 to level 2 magpie. you are, or multi-classing into like level 1 magpie, level 2 hero, you know,
Right.
or like one level of each of those. Like, that's not what you're doing. You are growing as a person. You have created a context here where, in elegant fashion that also is not overly cumbersome from the perspective of like mental load, a person is able to create a bespoke character progression that specifically reflects the narrative reality that you're able to play to find out in the game. But you're also able to potentially plan for. So like, for example, Fish in Radical Resonance knew that they were coming up on a secret confession and had multiple sheets ready because they knew they were going to change their reputation, but they didn't know which change to their reputation they were going to go with, and they wanted to play to find out. Yeah, it was incredible, right? And I mean, they're an incredible player. Honestly, I couldn't have been luckier with all the people who I got to play this with. Everybody just 10 out of 10 brought such great stuff to these stories. It was so cool to watch this moment of transformation. And I'd like to use that as an opportunity to talk about reputation, if that's okay. And specifically the term reputation, as well as how you constructed the reputations themselves. I want to hear about that. But the first thing I want to ask about is, reputation is a great way to refer to what in a lot of other systems might be called like a playbook, for example. What I've been saying to people about that is I've been highlighting that it is putting a spotlight on the fact that this is how people see these kids.
Yes.
It is how people talk about these kids. This is not an essential truth about the nature of these kids. Now, it does reflect things about these kids, right? A magpie talks, right? Typically, it's a little hard to play a magpie and have them not be talkative, right? But that's not the totality of who they are as a person. And the reasons they're talkative are multivarious, right? Infinite in multiplicity, right? Like, anybody can bring to that why their magpie is talkative, how their magpie is talkative. And they can go through the course of play to advance by confessing a secret, and at least to some degree dealing with that secret and moving on, and then having a new secret emerge with a new secret mood, and we'll get into all that. In a way that takes them from being a magpie to a zero, for example. Right? Like, it's also not all linear progression in the sense of like, oh, I'm just like dealing with all my shit and look at me being healthier over and over again, right? Not that moving from a magpie to a zero is inherently unhealthy, but what I mean to say is, like, a very boisterous kid could learn to be quieter because they have more stillness in their heart, or could learn to be quieter because they now feel like they're safer if they're not seen, right? And either of those things, and any number of other things, could take a magpie to being a zero, as an example, that I think illustrates how bespoke these paths can be. So my first question is, anything you want to share about the genesis of the reputations, the use of the term specifically, and then anything else you think is worth highlighting? And then secondarily, same basic question for the progression path.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned before we actually started recording, from this being a one-page game, like, the core structure of the game was there when it was one page, and there was a dice roll when you create your character. That's the heading is "Everyone knows you." ... And then the options are always in trouble, are the smartest kid in town, will try anything once, just moved to town, don't fit in with what's expected of you, and are quiet, but everyone looks up to you. And those ultimately were the 6 starting the reputations that I started with as I expanded this. So I think for whatever reason, when I wrote this as a one-page game, I wanted to start with that, like, what the people around you know about you, contrasted with the secret, which is the thing that no one knows. And that just naturally, like, because it is part of your identity that's related to being perceived or being understood by others, like, just very easily became reputation. And I stuck with it because, I mean, a lot of writing this game is really thinking deeply about what it means to be a kid that age. what's important, and a lot of the game is figuring yourself out. So you're starting with like, what do other people think of you? How are you understood? How are you perceived by people around you? And like, based on things that are true about you, but that's not, like you said, it's not the only thing that's true about you. And like, you could be a really chatty kid, and the thing that everyone notices about you is that you're super chatty. So you're the magpie. You could be a really chatty kid who gets in trouble all the time because of it, and that's what people notice. So you're the trouble reputation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So like, I'm in expanding those and writing to them, I wanted them to be really broad and have lots of ways to approach each one of them. The new kid, for instance, I really went and thought about it from two different directions. One being the kind of obvious, you've just moved to town kind of thing, but also maybe you were already here, but you've changed somehow. You're dealing with a disability that you didn't have before, or you're queer and have just come out and you are a new kid. Right. The way that people understand you is changing. So
I love that. I think that's so cool, because it's easy to assume that new kid literally means like you're new to town, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're a new version of yourself, so I'm going to share something, if it's okay, about my own lived experience around that time in life. When I was 12 years old, I almost died in a car accident, right? I'm okay. And I almost lost this hand, though, and this arm on this side. Yeah, it was very intense. And I was told at the time this hand would quote unquote never function normally again. I have good function in this hand. I was lucky enough to recover very well. But I was definitely a different kid after that happened than I was before that happened. And it happened to I swear to you, I didn't even think about this until we're having this conversation right now. But it happened to happen in middle school, right? Because I was 12 years old. And it was, what you just said resonated with me so profoundly, because now I've never been able to play this game as a player so far. Mm-hmm. I'm very excited to play it. Now I really want to play as like a new kid from that perspective. Do you know what I mean? Because that is such a cool idea. I'll parallel it to something one of the players did in a different sense. Mary, who I mentioned before, who played, is a disability advocate in the space, and who plays characters typically who have some form of disability, did so in A Silent Harvest, playing the trouble, specifically in a way that she talked about, above table, and also talked about in the talkback for A Silent Harvest, because a lot of times kids with disabilities aren't seen in that kind of context, but like in media, I mean, like in stories, but are often seen that way in real life, right? And the things that they're struggling with, and I really vibed with that, because like, you're a kid that age, you have trouble regulating your emotions, you're developing tools for that sort of thing, you're often in need of help, and the response, including and sometimes especially from adults in your life, is to treat you like you're trouble, right? To reduce you to like bad behavior, whatever that means. When in reality, it's like, no, I'm hurting. Like, I need you adult who know how to do things, help me figure out how to deal with this. I thought that was such a cool idea too. Same thing, like, it feels like that's in the same world of interpreting these reputations as what you just described for the new kid.
Yeah, Mary did such a good job with that character. It was, I think, the trouble reputation was an amazing choice for that, and the way she played it was really good.
I really want to highlight what another character did too before we move in, because I do want to, after this, if it feels good for both of us, I want to move into using the one page as a bit of a frame to talk about like specific stuff that is now in the fuller game, and that and a little bit about the evolution of that and design principles involved in that, that stuck with you throughout, or how things changed. Because looking at the one page, it really is astonishing how very much of the current game existed in that one page already, right? Like, I'm looking at little corners here and I'm like, this is a whole section now. There's so many things here. Like, it's really incredible. but before we get into that, I want to zero in on something that Andy did in Radical Resonance that speaks to combinatorial design. Speaks to the fact that all of these different design decisions that we've been talking about so far, and the ones we're going to get into, do not exist in a vacuum. Not only do they not exist in a vacuum, more broadly in the sense of like people bring their experiences of TTRPGs to these sorts of things. They exist in conversation with other TTRPGs that came out before them and around them and all that sort of thing, whether they be echoes in some cases of other things that exist in other places or something entirely new, right? Which I'm going to get to because I'm really excited to talk about that 3d6 core action roll. But Andy did something that is so profound, building off of what we talked about before with regard to putting the narrative first and how these incentives are invitations, not coercions, right? In terms of how they communicate what you care about as a game designer, what the game's sort of perspective on the world is, without taking away agency from the players at the table. Andy had been the one to receive a secret confession and chose to change their personal code for Maxime away from one that was more isolating and toward one that tied them to the Rocket Club. The Rocket Club felt like home, so they didn't want to, like they wouldn't leave them behind, essentially.
Right.
Deliberately, completely, as they said in the talkback, hobbling their ability to use their own secret impulse that they wrote, right? Because for those watching, in case you don't know, you write your secret impulse. We'll get into a description of what that means specifically, but like the player writes that in. Impossible to use it for progression in a way that absolutely knowingly kept them as the player from being able to hit their own threshold for their own secret confession, right? For the sake of story, because it is what felt right for the character and right for the story. And because they didn't, it was such a beautiful thing to see somebody play out this character realizing, I can't grow through sadness anymore about this. I'm getting goosebumps talking about it. Like, what a gorgeous idea.
Right.
And that's combinatorial design, right? Because its rules is written. Nothing is stopping you from putting in contradictory things into like components of your character build, right? I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your impression of that, having seen that play out, and also what it feels like as the designer, like what was intended, what evolved, and how it feels to see it hit the world that way.
Yeah, that was a beautiful moment. One, watching it play out in the stream, I thought it was just such a great choice of changing that. For one thing, I don't think in any of the games I've run anyone's ever taken that option of changing their code, because you can take something that's going to give you a mechanical benefit, or you can do something that's narratively kind of changing something about your character. And people mostly take the thing that's going to give you a mechanical benefit, but that other thing's on the table there too. So one, I just thought that was beautiful just in itself, of that change from being isolated to kind of holding on to the community of the club. But then in the talkback, to hear the expanded version of that as I'll no longer grow from sadness was just like such a, I wish I could say that I had designed the game with that in mind, but I did not. But it's such a good use of all those moving parts. And I mean, part of what I did design intentionally is like the player gets to decide how their character grows, of like, are you ready to share the secret or not? The mechanics say you are, but you don't have to. Or like, are you going to engage with those impulses or not? Like, you can choose that for yourself. But I think that was a really lovely further step into combining those different pieces into something that was really cool and great to see.
Again, agency, consequence, right? The negative space you leave and the trust that you provide the people at the table I think is what leads to that. And you may not have designed it intentionally, like at a conscious level, but
Yeah.
in designing the circumstances that allowed for it to emerge, you are in conversation, even like retroactively, right? In my view, with the emergence of that kind of thing, because you created the conditions that allowed it to occur. A different designer could have easily made, to your point about like, you don't have to confess your secret till you're ready. Another designer could have created a stick to that and been like, it's similar to crashing out. You can't take an action until you do it. Could be like, your XP track is full until you confess your secret. You I don't know, you take a condition, or you're hobbled on this, or you take one less reroll because you're so burdened with your condition, or whatever, right?
Yeah. There was an earlier version of the game that did have consequences like that for not sharing, and that was,
there you go,
one of the things that was thrown into the trash after the game consultation. So
I love that, and thank you for sharing that, because what I was about to say was, it's a perfectly valid design decision, but
Yeah.
it's not this game. Do you know what I mean? Like, it is, and the thing is, I think it's the more common design decision to make, right? Like, anecdotally, just from the games that I've experienced, I mentioned before, like, how not embracing your impulse doesn't have a stick, right? I didn't pull that out of nowhere. Like, there are other games where if you deny something, like if you embrace something like that, you get a goodie. If you deny something like that, you take a baddie, right?
Mhm.
Like, and the easiest baddie to take in this situation would be you take a condition, because
Right.
there has to be a cost, right? To not doing this thing. No, there doesn't. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's you can make things an invitation, and what I love about that is, at the level of design, you're consistently centering enthusiastic consent from everybody involved for everything that's occurring.
Yeah.
That's magic, right? Like, the magic circle that you build through that is profound. It is, if not the only, at least a major distillation of why I'm so in love with this game, and why it feels so infinitely full of potential to me as an engine through which we can explore story, and as a place I want to be. Because for those who are watching at home, who haven't picked up the game yet, one person's opinion, right? But like, the experience of playing this game is so deeply joyful. And it's not just me, right? Like, I've had players in all of these tables that I've run tell me, without you in the room, so this is not about like, you know, like saying nice things about your game to your face or anything, say that this is, you know, this is at the top of their experiences playing TTRPGs. Like, the joy that they get from this game. And I say joy very specifically, even though they're very stressed out in game when I'm running stuff, right? Like,
Yes.
they're dealing with a lot of challenging stuff. The joy they get from it is profound, and it's profound precisely because you leave that negative space, you lead with that trust, and you're non-coercive in your design. It doesn't mean there aren't boundaries. I gave the example before. Crashing out, you gotta get rid of a condition to be able to take an action again. There has to be a cage of some sort, right, for you to rattle against. But deciding where that cage is and where it's not, and how and why matters a lot. So I just want you to know that, right, about my opinion of it and my experience. Yeah, and people listening to know that. That design consultancy, I'm so glad you got to have that. What I would love to ask about when it comes to that, because I know you mentioned it was a vulnerable process, and now you mentioned that there was that mechanic, it was one of the ones that was stripped away. What do you think you're going to take forward, not just in the further development of this game, right? We're going to talk more about mechanics, but what do you think you're going to take forward in the development of this game, and then in other games that you're developing, be they more one-page games or like expansions of existing one-page games, or longer games that start as longer games, if you have any of that that you're planning to do after Rocket Club, right? What do you think you're going to take with you that will give you an opportunity to start closer to where you want to start than you did with your first go?
Honestly, I think I think it had to be the process that it was. Like, don't I don't think it was bad that stuff was in it. I think the stuff needed to go, but I think it had to be there in order to be pared down into what it is now. Or, I mean, there were things that were just thrown out entirely, and like, it was good to have that there to know that that's not what I want. And I mentioned the mood die mechanic being in a pretty bad place. Not even that long ago, like last fall, I think it was, that this was the thing I had worked a lot on. It was too big, it was too complicated, but because I did that helped make what it is now. So I think it's okay to just throw a lot in there and then pull it back. But I suppose what I would take away is like looking for that moment to step back and see, like, what do I want from this? What is my ultimate goal, and work from that moment where, like I said, oh, okay, yeah, this needs to be about player agency, and I need to trust that, to find that without needing a consultation, but consultation was great too.
Consultation is still going to be great, because having somebody trusted who knows what they're doing and like cares a lot about it will never not be useful, right? Like no matter how many times you do a thing, you're still you, and like somebody else bringing fresh eyes is always helpful. I love what you just said. I really want to lean into that, because there's all this pressure that people will often put on themselves, feel ambiently, right? Feel out in the ambience, or sometimes receive directly from other people, unfortunately, right? Yeah. To be good, do the thing. Like, I've never encountered a process for any kind of art, or really kind of anything that you create, right? Even if you don't strictly term it art, wherein you can get anywhere without getting there, right? Like, you have to get out there and do the thing, which also means you have to accept that not everything you do is going to be whatever perfection is right out the gate, right? It's not going to be a perfect reflection of what you want, even to the point you were mentioning about like trusting that you want this about to be player agency and really leaning into that. I self-monitor a lot, right? And it can be hard to fight like a critical voice in one's own head, especially when you're feeling vulnerable, which can often happen when you're creating art. And so there can be a pressure to like, oh, I have to do what other people do because they know better than I do, right? Or I have to do this because it's what's done, you know? But why? I think what you said about first principles is a great answer that really resonates with me, because I'm a first principles person too, which for the audience, to make sure I'm not miscommunicating here, what I mean by that is I like to know, and it sounds like you, at least in this case, have benefited from knowing it and enjoyed knowing what matters fundamentally to you about what you're doing, why you're doing it, and then tying every decision you make about it back into those first principles any way that you can. I find it very grounding, for what it's worth, for the folks at home, in terms of even campaign development, for example, for stuff like this. That is how I do all of it, right? And that's how I would recommend anybody consider, finding a way in for themselves that works for them. With that, just a matter of critical thinking. Why are we doing this? What do you care about here? Articulate those things clearly, concisely to yourself. Great. Everything has to serve that. Organizing principle, super easy, right? Like, not easy to articulate, but like once you have it, everything gets a lot easier.
And you also, you don't have to, like, as you're putting things in there, you don't have to make sure at that moment that everything fits that. You can throw it in and then later be like, that doesn't work, and get rid of it, or I need to adjust this.
I'm also a big fan of listening to your gut. Every mistake I've ever made in my life has been denying my instincts, right? Like, I can't recall a time where I actually listened to my gut, really, and also was like, I shouldn't have done that. But I can recall so many times where I'm like, I shouldn't have done that, and I did not listen to that. Right. And artistically, I think part of that is I'm really convinced that in our subconscious minds, there is something about how the human mind processes things, wherein there's a part of our system that understands things in a way that our conscious mind hasn't caught up to yet, right? And it matters to listen to that in a lot of ways. It matters for safety, but it also matters for like artistic engagement. If one has the courage to embrace that instinct and take the risk of like, I don't know why this is here, but I feel like this needs to be here, I'm gonna put it in there.
Right.
You're gonna come around and figure out, oh shit, that's why I wanted that there. That's good to know. Okay, that's great. And I think that's so cool, you know? I think it's important that people feel empowered to do that, and I love that you're empowered to do that here. I would love to use that as a segue to get into a bit of mechanics we haven't touched on yet, because if you can believe it, this far into the interview, we haven't talked about the core action role of the game. Yeah. We've talked about components of it, but we haven't talked about the totality of it, and I would love to do that, starting with the one page, right? Because I'm looking at the one page. Thank you again for sharing that. And it's worth noting for everybody watching. So there were already 4 core traits from the beginning, right? Design, propulsion, grace, and impact. So that was already there. And actually, I'm looking at this, and if I'm not mistaken, the wording is exactly the same.
Not exactly. A lot of it is,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, just for the design, just for the descriptions, not the system above necessarily. But I'm looking at design, propulsion, grace, and impact. And I'm like, with lightness and finesse, find the path of least resistance. Those are the same words.
Yes,
man. Those are the same words that are there right now. So that is profound. That is really cool. That you already had that, and you already had the idea that this is 4 traits represent how you complete your actions. Starting ratings between 0 and 3 determined by your rocket specialty and character details. For any character action, like challenging action, roll 3 6-sided die. Each die will represent a distinct aspect of the outcome, so use 3 visually different dice, or roll sequentially. The first die determines whether the action succeeds or fails. The second determines your character's mood while acting. The third determines a side effect. So that's all already there. Rerolls, your points in a particular trait represent the number of dice you may re-roll. After you roll, you may choose to re-roll any of the dice up to the number of points in the appropriate trait, if any. You can re-roll multiple dice and/or a single die multiple times. The last result you roll will be final. I'm sorry, because I'm about to embarrass you, but geez, like, fuck. Like, it's so cool because it's all there. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's there at the beginning. And the thing is, what I got to really emphasize here, and I apologize because I know it's uncomfortable to feel that here, be on camera with somebody gushing about the thing you made in front of you. But like, okay, a lot of people would have made a game that uses like, somebody else's core role mechanic already. Would have been easy to make this game PBTA, 2d6 plus or minus a modifier. Would have been easy to make these traits have the same numerical values, but have a plus or minus modifier on the total of the roll, rather than have it be the number of rerolls that you have. That is kind of low-hanging fruit from a design perspective. And truthfully, somebody could take this same basic idea about kids in a rocket club with an alien invasion and make a standard PBTA game with playbooks instead of reputations, right? And it could fully conceptually exist. Like, it's not hard for me to think of that game existing. You didn't do that. You created a 3d6 roll against outcome, side effect, and mood that had the same moods. I know you said mood changed a lot, right? But for the most part, I'm looking at this here, had the same moods. That we ended up with.
What I mean is what the mood does changed a lot, or like how you engage with it as a player.
That's what I mean. Like, so to clarify what I meant, like, absolutely. The bones though, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay,
excitement became thrill. Yeah.
Right. And anger's just anger, not anger/frustration. But like everything else is the same at a top level, right? Obviously side effect is a little bit different, but like malfunction and crisis, I'd love to hear about that, but like I can already see an evolution there. Draw attention is the same at a top level at least, right? Although you had, and thank you so much for this again, you gave us the opportunity to be able to play test an evolution that might be lose something, right? Taking the place of that. Look foolish, look cool are both there. Learn something is there. And gain advantage, rephrased as something extra, and possibly reframed mechanically, I'd love to hear about that evolution too, is still all kind of there. And then in outcome, utter failure, becoming misfire is it's a great thing to lean into the phrase for rocketry, right? And communicates the same idea. It says utter failure, possibly injury or death, which is interesting. I'd love to hear you talk about that. 2 to 3 failure, still there. 4 partial success becoming mixed success, like that clarification, even though it's the same intent. And then 5 to 6 full success. Like, this is there, right?
Yeah.
Before you went to Evil Hat. Yeah, before you went to Evil Hat, and when you wrote this as a one-pager, you made re-rolls the thing, right? Which is a big design decision. Not a modifier, re-rolls. And then you created this ecosystem. We were talking about what Andy did with the code impacting the impulse. I think this creates a context for people to think more to do that. Andy might have thought of that anyway, right? But I think you make the table for that because at the center of this game is combinatorial mechanics. It's 3 different things that exist in conversation with each other. I cannot possibly tell you how fucking cool I think that is. So I would love to take some time, if you're okay with it, to dive into the component pieces of this. First, though, what would you like to share about its genesis overall? Where did it come from?
So, I mean, part of my experience of making one-page games, again, that were like, I didn't spend a ton of time on them. I had an idea in my head and like threw some stuff together, and then honestly, it's kind of like what we were talking about before. It's making a lot and then getting rid of stuff so it fits on a sheet of paper, which is, I think, one of the challenging things about it is like it needs to fit and be legible, and understandable. But part of that process is just like trying to come up with something different for each one, as far as like what kind of random mechanic is in there. So it's really just, it's experimental and like trying things out. And I probably partly got lucky just trying this out, but it was inspired by Powered by the Apocalypse games, particularly a thing that I've always really liked in a lot of those games, Monster Hearts, Thirsty Sword Lesbians, when there's a move that doesn't just do one thing, where it's like, you roll the dice and then it's like choose 2 from this list, and if you got a lower roll, choose 2 from this list and 1 from the bad list, and it's like all these things are happening at once. And I liked that, though what I didn't want to do was have the list and have it be that prescribed. I mean, there's a list, but it's not it's not specific.
But it's a list of invitations again, to talk about like the thing from before. You're inviting people to do things, and 2 of the 3 of these are determined by players, right? Mood and side effect. Good.
Right. At the point of the one page, I mean, there isn't space to say a lot, so it wasn't necessarily made clear who decides what thing is which. It's just that these things happen. And then I mean, I wish I remembered the moment that the reroll idea came to me, but I think it's just having these 3 different lists. Like, how do you engage with all of them? Like, are you adding 1 to each of them, or like what's happening there? And rerolls, I think, just felt like a way of dealing with that, of like, you can improve or attempt to improve what happens, but you have to make a choice, or you get to make a choice of what you're actually changing there.
So I'd like to, if it's okay, before I'd like to highlight something for you here that I don't know if it's been talked about this way. Are you familiar with the three body problem?
Yeah.
Okay.
The book.
But
yeah.
also through that conceptually the idea of the three body problem, right?
Yeah.
So I'd say this is a bit of a three body solution, right? Because what you've created specifically, talk about numbers here for a second, specifically choosing to have 3d6 in conversation with each other, and then having the rerolls be a shared resource across them, specifically making the decision so that this is not a reroll on all three, because a different person could have made a design decision to be like, okay, you can use this, each reroll lets you reroll all three. Punitively could have even been, hey, you have to reroll all three. And then
I don't think that's like, good for you necessarily.
No, it's
in most
not,
situations.
Well, and it creates a different tension, right? Because like, let's say you like two of your three and the third is really bad. Are you going to risk losing the two good ones for the bad one? It is a very different psychological experience at the table. What you've done here, and again, this was before you even had the conversation with the consultation, you dove into centering player agency arguably just already explicitly with how you design the rerolls, because by trusting the player to have the choice of like, this reroll only goes to one of those each reroll goes to one individual die, you invite the conversation of, what am I prioritizing here? What do I care about most about these things individually, and how they work in combination, and in combination with the narrative moment, and in combination with the threat that we're facing, and in combination with what's happening to the rest of the characters. Like, but it doesn't create undue mental load, right? There's an elegance to it that just flows in practice that is that's a big part of why I'm so impressed by it, right?
I think it's a testament to how well it worked in the one-page version that it really hasn't changed. Like, it's and
it's almost like a bit of a game engine unto itself to me, right? Because in this context of middle school kids in a Rocket Club works really, really well. I also think this would work really, really well to interrogate things at the table in a way that centers player agency and responsibility, and that also invites attentiveness to a character's state of mind, and a character's motivations, and a character's priorities in a wide variety of genres.
I think it'd be pretty easily adaptable. I mean, like, you can change what the side effects are, because looking cool and looking foolish aren't going to be important to somebody who's not a middle schooler, probably.
Although people do care about how other people perceive them, right? And like the idea of like looking like the version of yourself that you want to be versus looking like a version of yourself you don't want anyone to see is probably to some degree a universal human experience. Hopefully we grow into places where like we have better tools of dealing with that, but we're social creatures. We care about each other, right? But yeah, I agree.
It could be a different version of that for a different kind of genre of story.
Right, exactly. Like an evolution that makes sense in the context, but like I think there's a lot of juice in that. I think it's extremely worth continuing to engage with in a variety of ways, and I just wanted to highlight that because it is so uncommon to come across a genuinely new game mechanic, and much less a genuinely new game mechanic that provides enough scaffolding for there to be hacks and evolutions and things in the way that we're describing, and at the same time have it be elegant enough to function without a lot of load. You were mentioning before that the mood during the progression of this, that wasn't always the case, right? Like the mood side in particular created a lot of lift. So I'd love to hear on the part of the player or the people at the table. I'd love to hear more about whatever you'd like to share with regard to this elegant design, meaning, because I don't want to make it awkward for you and like you have to talk about how elegant the thing you made is. I want to know I want to know whatever you're comfortable sharing about how it got where it got to. It started so close to where it is in a broad sense, but then a lot of important stuff happened in the middle, and I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, the like I said, the mood probably changed the most, and not the list of moods. But even in this version, it's just a mood, and there isn't really any direction on like what that means. My expectation was that the player says how it kind of describes that mood and how it comes into play. And as I expanded this and wrote more detail, that's what I initially went with, was you roll a mood, say how you feel that mood. And I think in the original version that I submitted to Evil Hat, I even added a little bit after that said, don't spend too much time. If you can't think of it, just move on, which is just terrible. Like, to design something and then tell players you don't have to engage with
Don't worry about it. It's okay. Yeah. I don't want to burden you. But honestly, that feels relatable to me.
Yeah.
Because it's like, because there's a vulnerability to it, because you're doing something new. And it's like, right. But if it doesn't vibe with you, it's okay. Keep going. Like, but no, pay attention to it. It's good. Yeah. You know?
So, I mean, one of the initial bits of feedback from Evil Hat was like, you need to make this matter. And there wasn't like, this is how you make this matter. It was just deal with this because this is a problem.
Good.
And I think the later version of that, so in the one page, I mean, it's so clearly the bones of the game, but the secret is tied to a mood. Later on, that attachment became a point where if you roll the mood that's attached to your secret, it would cause some kind of harm. Conditions weren't part of the game at that point, but it would do something like that, which was a reason to avoid rolling that mood. So it like sort of drew attention to the mood die as something that you need to consider in that roll. But again, just like wasn't right. Like, it didn't feel right. And when I got rid of that the whole injury thing that I had going on, it didn't work anymore. So I started to lean toward what we have now, which is sort of prescribing a way that the mood is described, or the way that the mood happens. And I won't get into the super complicated version of that, but it's similar in some ways to what there is now, but it involved like different players asking questions to the player who rolled the die, or making like the impulse was like something that another player determines, and it was not good. But it had something good at its core.
And to your point, it's how you got to what we have now. Which does work very elegantly and cleanly and quickly, and that people honestly oftentimes talk about how within the 3D6, it's the mood roll that is most memorable for them. Mm-hmm. It's the mood roll that really sticks out to them. It's a mood roll that I've been hearing people say that they want to take inspiration from and bring it to other games also. Like other games that they even just run, right? Yeah. But like that dimensionality, or like one thing that Quinn brought up that I think somebody else might have mentioned also, that came up I think in the live stream, and then again in the talkback for Silent Harvest, is like even using the mood die as a jumping off point at a table. And this is like a home ruling thing for the use of like an emotion wheel, right? And like making things more specific within that mood as like an additional thing that people can use as a tool. I don't think it's necessary at the game level of design. Like, I don't think you needed to include something like that, but it leaves room at the table. So if people want to play with that at their table, they can do that, right?
Yeah, different ways to engage with it. I think the thing that was like the moment that I liked the most in figuring out this new system was tying it to the reputations, where each reputation has different ways of engaging with the moods, which
I like that.
Didn't happen before at all.
I also think that that's extremely cool when it comes to the possibility of changing reputations as you evolve, like when you confess a secret, as one of the major advancements that you can take, because you then also change. So normally speaking, for everybody at home, you, regardless of the choice that you make for major or minor advancement when you confess a secret, it's not your secret anymore, right? Like you have a new secret, you write in a new secret, which also means that you need to write in a new secret mood prompt, which is in the form of an impulse, not a question. And it replaces one of the 4 questions that align with 4 of the 6 moods based on your reputation. So you have 4 questions, you have 2 impulses that come from your reputation connected to your moods. You take away one of those questions, the one that adheres to whichever of those 4 moods is most closely aligned with your current secret, right? They could all be aligned to some degree, but your one of them you decide matters more to your secret in that moment. You get rid of that question, you put in the impulse. The impulse needs to be short, actionable, and like active, essentially, right? Like it has to be an impulse. It has to be a thing you can do.
Ideally, something that can apply to a lot of different situations.
Yeah, you don't want to back yourself in, right?
Yeah.
Because then you're not going to be able to embrace it a lot of times,
Right.
and you want that to be your choice at the table.
You don't want it to be like punch someone, which is short and actionable, but what if you're by yourself?
Correct. Or what if you don't, like, I guess if you don't want to punch someone, that's just the answer. But like,
Yeah.
it can also, instead, like a great example that came from one of the games of something that can be punch someone is break something, right? Like break something can work as an impulse, but doesn't have to be prescriptive about what it means to break or what something is, right?
Yeah.
You'd find that in the moment. So yeah, I think that's great. When you're changing from having one reputation to another reputation, as a part of that process that exists already, your whole mood array changes in terms of like questions and impulses, right? And then you go, because you have different questions available and you have different impulses. And I think that's also pretty elegant for a process. It's a little bit, comparatively speaking, more cumbersome than the rest, right? Like every other advancement you take takes less work to change on your sheet. This one takes a little bit more. Even then, it's pretty smooth because it's built into that. Were those kinds of synergies something that emerged naturally? Was that something that you put a lot of thought into? Was it a mix of both?
Probably a mix of both. The advancement is definitely something that evolved throughout the process of like when it happens was basically always the same. How you get to that point changed, like what accrues experience basically. But there are details of like what you can do with the advancement that changed, and really like. I mean, the game's like a big machine, so it's like if you change something in one place, a lot of times you have to change a bunch of other things to fit that. So I think that's something that I think that speaks to what you're saying, where there are these interconnected parts where a little bit of a shift, a change, creating this impulse and question mechanic required a change to the advancement mechanic, basically. I mean, another thing that you can do with the minor advance is change one of your questions or impulses. So, I mean, I could imagine a scenario where radical resonance continued, and if someone confessed their secret again to Andy's character, they could have changed that sadness impulse and said like, okay, here is a way that I can grow from sadness.
100%. Absolutely. And if we do a follow-up with that, that might be something we actually see in practice.
Or change
I love that.
reputations, and then that's going to change anyway.
Yeah, or both, right? Like there's so much room in ways that, again, don't create undue burden at the table, but they invite action and agents and like center agency through presentation of choice, right? I love that, and I love where you put the boundaries there too, because to put a spotlight on that for a second, cannot change the nature of the of what's associated. So like if it's a question, it has to say a question. If it's an impulse, it has to say an impulse. But within that,
Mhm.
question can be whatever you want it to be. Impulse can be whatever you want it to be, whatever feels right for that character in that moment. That's a really nice balance of like, here's a cage, here's all this room. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
I think that's really, really cool. Before we potentially move to a different part of the design, getting too far away from the core 3d6 roll, I did want to, and there's more we could talk about within the 3d6 roll if you want, but I did want to highlight, because you're talking about different ways to gain XP. In the games I ran, people absolutely love chasing a triple. A little bit of that is just like the gambler's thing of like, I'm close, I want it, let me go for it. But like they were, and it happened a lot with re-rolling the mood die, right? Because there's a sort of like a little bit of maneuverability. If the triple that they're chasing had a mood that felt like it made sense to them, because sometimes it didn't,
Right.
and sometimes they said, no, I don't want to do it because of that. And that really mattered. And I think that's a really cool thing. When it would fit, they would re-roll that one a lot. But honestly, sometimes they would risk other stuff on the other areas just to try to get the triple, and not even just for the XP, or I would argue primarily for the XP. It's because they wanted the flashback. So my question is, and the flashback has to be tied to the mood. So they would do that even knowing like, oh, it's going to be emotionally complicated. Right?
Am I remembering correctly that someone rolled a natural 3 1s and just kept it?
Yes, you are remembering that correctly. They just fully kept it. It was in a Fractured Sky, where I'm trying to remember who it was, but they rolled 3 1s, and they're like, "Yep, that's what's happening." I got a misfire, because I didn't get a lot of misfires across the whole thing. Because I will say people get very scared of misfires, and when they have any rerolls available at all, like they'll sit on a crisis more than they'll sit on a misfire, in my anecdotal experience.
That's by design.
100%. That super duper makes sense. And I really like how you balance that overall, because you do have the very often like PBTA thing of like 3 down is a failure, 4 is a mixed success, 5, 6 is a success. It's actually weighted a little bit more nicely toward players, like more forgivingly than a lot of other PBTA, because some of them will be like 4, 5 are a mixed success, only 6 is a success. Like not that it's exactly PBTA, but like Candle Obscura takes it from that, right? Is in that system. Blades in the Dark, exactly. Well, Candle Obscura takes it from Blades in the Dark, and Blades in the Dark takes it from it's an evolution from is how I understand the evolution of those games happen. But like it's 6 and 5 both being successes. I'd love to hear a little bit about that decision. 4 mixed success, we could do a whole thing on that, but then 3, 2 as just failures, which is enough, but like in comparison to a misfire, feels like a relief to people at the table, because they're like, oh good, I just failed at what I'm trying to do, it isn't worse than that. And then the misfire being there, all that is really, really cool. I'm going to want to talk about all that. To take it back to the question, where did the decision to make a flashback be available at all come from? Where did the decision to tie it into experience, accrual? And also, I'd love to hear more past that about like the way it impacts roles. But let's focus first on the existence of the flashback and its connection to experience.
So, rolling 3 dice, it just seemed like something has to happen when you roll 3 of the same. Like,
fair.
There needs to be like a cool payoff to that. The triple did different things throughout the course of writing the game, and I am not sure when it landed on a flashback. But I mean, again, going back to like emotion and mood is at the core of this, and there's a mood that you roll where like that's coming into play in the narrative somehow. I liked that, having this special moment, you've rolled 3 of the same dice, that could be a time to focus in on the mood a little bit more, and I thought that was a cool way to focus in on the mood. The experience, actually the whole like inclusion of an experience track in this game came at a kind of a late stage, because earlier there was a different way that you got toward an advancement. And adding experience was, I think, really a great decision, because then that made a bunch of little things where I could say you get experience for this. It's like an automatic, like a little pool of incentive that you can throw in whenever you want to. And I think, like, I try to conceptualize experience in a way that makes sense as being like, there are moments that are important, and those help you grow and help you become more comfortable with your friends, and leading up to that, sharing the secret. So I thought a flashback is a nice moment that works for that too, and also an incentive to. I guess in writing it, I didn't even necessarily think of it as an incentive to chase a triple. I always thought of it as sometimes a triple is going to happen. And this is an incentive to do the narrative thing of the flashback. Though apparently it seems like
it's a big carrot.
The flashback really itself is incentive to try to get a triple, which is fun.
You know how that lands for me, for what it's worth, is it feels like a decision in the game that communicates to me that the game sees story as reward, right? And I love that. I love that as a way to better understand what I experience from the game, or like what the game means to me. And I think that's why people, again, aside from like it's fun to chase a triple, why it's such a profound carrot, because it is telling us that in this world, you are, what matters most is learning more and sharing more, right? And connecting up with more. It's at a level of game, it tells me that the game thinks that a story is a thing worth, so worthwhile that it is the thing you get when you do something very rare and difficult to do, right? Yeah. And then that you connected that with XP speaks to, well, you learn through action, by doing, through connection, in engaging in the world, right? And I gotta say, like, there are ways, and this is a little bit of me still as a neophyte in the space, looking at this with relatively fresh eyes, meaning like looking at TTRPGs with relatively fresh eyes. But like, I see this as an eminently play to find out game system, and as a game system wherein XP being tied to actually learning how to do things in the world. Both those things feel like things influenced by OSR, right? Is what I'm trying to get at. Like, aside from like the PPTA stuff and whatever, play to find out is literally like a truism that comes from OSR culture, right? And making experience less like instrumentalized, right? Sometimes OSR stuff can be hyper instrumentalized if it's very like dungeon crawly or whatever, right?
Right.
But sometimes it's more about like, hey, it shouldn't be video game push button, I get number go up and then I get stuff. Like, it should be, oh, I'm getting better at, I don't know, playing the oboe because I'm playing the oboe, right?
Right.
Like that's, and so I love how you married in those kinds of things. Can you talk a little bit, before we get back to other parts of the 3D6, about what your thought process has been like in designing this as a game that allows room through negative space, and other design decisions related to that, to play to find out?
First, I'll say I really love games where you improve by failing. I think that is a really elegant experience, a way to deal with experience, which I didn't do with this, but
no, but you took a lesson from it, right? Because I get what you're saying. You mentioned Monster Hearts before, and in Monster Hearts you get XP when you roll a 6 down, right?
Right.
But it's, you don't gain XP by failing, in the sense it doesn't come from a failed roll, but you do gain XP by going out into the world and taking risks, doing stuff, and those things are often complicated, right?
Yeah, I think how you advance and how you gain experience, or whatever the mechanic is in a game, tells you a lot about what the game cares about. And in this case, it's connection and emotion. So that's
Yeah.
mostly where the experience comes from. Remind me what the question was.
No worries. It has to do with tying that into designing this in a way that allows room at the table to play to find out, right?
Yeah.
Or even from a guide perspective, to elaborate on that a little bit, I knew a lot about the world of each of these campaigns when I was going into them, and I knew a lot that grew through the process of playing. But I went in there and I did what we did together. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
I didn't go in there and I wasn't like, you have to do this thing. Like, we knew where we were in the story, so we'd start wherever that was. But past that, they did stuff. Like, they asked me in A Silent Harvest if I had the whole thing that happened in the Infinite Forest and whatever planned in the finale. No, I didn't. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, Joey and Cris went up with the little alien bits on their hand and went to touch the alien thing. And then they rolled about it, and those rolls went a specific way.
Right.
And based on that, everybody went into a liminal space and dealt with a bunch of other stuff. I was prepared for the possibility of, like, I had component pieces, right?
Right.
But like,
that, something like that could happen.
But fully play to find out.
Yeah.
I found it very freeing as the guide. I'm like, oh, I get to play. Do you know what I mean? Because I get to do that more than just like I'm facilitating. I'm not a game engine. I'm not like I'm not a computer program you're just like beep boop beep into, right? Like, I'm a player at the table. I really get to play and be surprised by things and lean into that. I'd love for you to talk about whatever you'd like to talk about regarding the design decisions that you made or your artistic intent that supports playing to find out, or that creates room for that.
I think it really all boils down to like the way that I want to play a game. I mean, I try to avoid universal statements, but I think probably every game designer designs the game that they want to play.
I hope so. Yeah.
And like, when I GM any game, I don't do a lot of prep. I want to improvise and I want to figure out what's going on as it goes on and lean into what the players are trying to do, lean into what happens to their characters. So that's really where I come from as a person running games. And I love purely collaborative games as well. Like, if I'm going to choose any game to play, it's probably going to be completely collaborative. And a lot of the games that I've written more recently have been fully collaborative. So, like, I guess part of that is like you said, I want the GM, the guide in this case, to be a player at the table and to have things to respond to. Really, every dice roll is a whole bunch of things for everybody to respond to. And I like that randomness drives the story, and lets everybody create a story that might not happen otherwise. Like you said, the liminal space that everyone was transported to might not have happened without the dice being rolled in a certain way. Baby girl becoming sentient would not have happened if the dice had
something extra. Yeah, literally, if Steve had not, or if they together, I think if Steve and I rolled, no, because it was rocket surgery, so something together. If they hadn't rolled a 6 on side effect, then Baby Girl would not have spoken in Bad Buddy lyrics, and the world would be poorer for it.
It
right?
would, yeah.
I love that. It makes me so happy. The incredible variety of possibility built into this. I do want to check in very quickly because we are 5 minutes away from when we were originally cut for time. How are you doing on time on your side?
I could probably do another like 15.
Perfect. Don't worry about that. That's absolutely good. That'll give us enough time to be able to wrap out. All right, so I could talk to you forever about all of the various components of this.
Yeah.
I recommend everybody who's listening to this dig into the details. I mentioned all the different outcomes before, and the side effects we talked about, the moods we talked about. We even talked about the triples. I would love to move from the core role with the time that we have left to talking about a couple of other design decisions, at least in a broad sense, that I found really impactful. One of them that I'd like to get into is the whole section of, I mean, we're talking about Rocket Club. I am going to have to stop down for a second and talk about rockets, because it feels like if we're not going to talk about the rocket rigs, what are we doing? Then I would like to get into the creating your club, creating your town, and then the alien threat maker. We won't have time to talk about all of them as much as we'd like, but I'd like to get into something essential about each. So starting with the rocket rigs, I see that here it was originally referred to as rocket specialty, right? But I am seeing that they are virtually the same, exactly the same, in the sense of like it. Go ahead.
Explosions changed to chemistry set.
Right, exactly. And I did notice overall, it did seem, you mentioned moving away from injuries and harm over to conditions. It does seem like, especially with the middle schoolers, I'm noticing a trend of moving away from physical harm being like definitively existent at the level of design, right?
Yes.
Actually, on that, do you want to talk about that and the emergence of conditions before we go into the rocket, the rocket rigs?
Yeah, I think just in the initial, because I moved away from it very quickly, but there are moments in the one-page version of this, like the rolling a 1 and outcome, it says possible injury or death. I think came from thinking of this as just a really quick, like we play this as a one-shot game, and like that's an easy like a negative outcome, like big stakes negative outcome for this thing that we're just going to play for 2 hours or 3 hours. And I didn't get to the point of like really overtly talking about harm to children as a safety issue until pretty late in the process, but throughout really expanding this into a full game, injury ultimately was a choice of the player to define what that is. So that stayed throughout. The way of getting there was more complicated and just kind of unnecessarily clunky, but that part of player choice had been there really all along after this one-page part.
I love that. That's really good to know. Okay, so the rocket rigs, right? Talk to me about what you would want people to take away as the most central or like important element of the rocket rigs as a part of the overall machinery of this game.
I mean, it's Rocket Club. On the one page, the rockets are the very first thing that you pick. And a lot of these things, you roll a die and randomly get a thing, but you choose your rocket specialty in this case. It actually stayed rocket specialty up until the editor went through this right before we formatted it for the playtest. It was rocket specialty. It's just an unnecessary extra word, honestly. But like, really the beginning of this game was just this picture in my head of a group of ridiculous middle school kids who are super smart hanging out together in a garage building things that they really shouldn't be building, that work in ways that they shouldn't work either. As I thought more deeply about it, the rockets are about agency in the world. This is how these kids can do things that they otherwise wouldn't be able to do, how they are equipped to stand up against an existential threat that they shouldn't need to deal with. Thinking of this as, again, like an allegory for climate change, it is interesting to think of rockets as something that are not necessarily very climate friendly, being the thing that's there, but that's how it is.
That's okay. These
Yeah,
kids are not creating the problem. The giant corporations are creating the problem.
right.
These kids are
Yeah,
they exist in the world that they were born into, and they got to use the tools that are available to them, right?
exactly.
Uh, all right, so I have a question before we actually get into the creating your club. I feel like we got to talk about rocket surgery a
Yeah,
second,
we do,
right?
for sure.
It is so on the way to rocket surgery there is an ability to do a help action, right? Essentially, give a reroll with a shared risk of condition, right?
Yeah.
Coming off of that, if a condition is earned through the rolls. But other than that, rolls are all individual, except for a special move called rocket surgery, where you don't use a trait. Just for everybody at home to follow, you don't use a trait, but you use what you call a blueprint. You answer a bunch of questions collectively. The answers to those questions then determine how many rerolls you have, and then somebody rolls. You do the rerolls, and then the outcome applies to everybody. There's a single side effect that applies to everybody. So if it's learned something, it's not like everybody gets to ask a different question. And then everybody does individually react to the mood on their own terms. So if they have a question or an impulse, they react to it the way that they react to it. And then that determines the outcome of the rocket surgery. How did that evolve, and what do you want to spotlight as most important for people to take away from it?
I wanted that to be an important scene that's a possibility in Rocket Club, because again, I mean, I said just a minute ago, the image that inspired this game is a bunch of kids in a garage building rockets, so like that should be able to happen in the game. And also, like, this has to be a group role. Like, you can't make a rocket rig by yourself. It has to be at least a couple of members of the Rocket Club, so there's that community coming into that to make the thing that's most important. So rocket surgery came about pretty early in the process, and it was that for a long time it was a more complicated process that involved like multiple dice rolls by multiple people, and it's kind of, it didn't even really have the same result. I mean, the result was building something, but it didn't give as much detail, I guess, as the version of it now. And again, that was a great note from the consultation with Avery. She had read that and was like, this process is going to take like 45 minutes to an hour in gameplay. Like, what are you doing here? Because this was also at a time when the mood roll was way too complicated, and there were multiple mood dice involved in rocket surgery. So that was a really good push to really, I just tore it down and rebuilt it and was like, okay, we don't need to even necessarily deal with traits and stuff for this. It's
Love that.
Because it is an important thing, I felt like it could be different from everything else. And it's slightly different.
It's also community centering in the way that you described, and to zero in on that a little bit more, what I'm hearing and what I think of when you're talking about that, and when we were using it in game, the fact that there are no traits without that prior knowledge on my side landed to me as though like we're coming together as a group, so all of our traits matter. It's not but in a way where mechanically they don't have to be there. What has to be there is how do we work together? And that's where the blueprint coming, like giving us the modifiers that they give us the number of traits, like giving us the minus this plus that add up to whatever the amount of rerolls are, in place of the trait, made perfect sense to me, like intuitively. Yeah. By the time it reached me and I read that, I was like, okay, I fully get why this is that way.
Right. And the you've been talking about negative space and the cage. I think in this, that was very much an intent that I wanted to work out, that if the club is getting together and trying to build something, they can do it. Like, it's gonna happen. But then that cage is made that they can't do anything, or they can do anything, but it's gonna get complicated. And I really loved seeing in the actual plays the leaning into the negative consequences of the thing that they're building. like even when it isn't necessary, just to build up those extra rerolls by giving it, setting things on fire as it's launching. Because I think like the thing I think works in this is if the club has all the time in the world to make something, they can do something pretty incredible and spend weeks on it, and like it's not going to be a problem, and it'll be clean and it'll work well. But most of the time they need to do it right then,
super fast and with whatever they've got around them.
And to make up for the cost of having to do it super fast, they need to make it dangerous.
And conceptually, it makes all the sense in the world at the level of narrative, right?
Yeah.
That, like, if they are doing this fast and they want it to work, they're cutting corners. They're finding ways to make things happen with what they have, right?
And there's also agency there where they get to decide how it's dangerous.
100%. Which would be very different in quality if I, as the guide, were determining how it's dangerous, punitively, rather than they, as those who have the responsibility, because they have the agency, decide how it's dangerous. Then it becomes joyful. Then it's like, oh yeah, it sets things on fire in a fun way. Do you know what I mean? Like, in a way that we like find to be interesting. As we're rounding this out, I want us to touch on, it's a huge thing. We could do a whole interview on just this area. Creating your club, right? To set the table for the folks at home. Step 1, introducing your characters. Name, pronouns, reputation, rocket rig. You also have here ask relationship questions in step 2. So here you're building it out, starting with, these are the people in the club. The bridge is, these are how the people in the club know each other, what they think about each other, some shared experiences that they have, memories, right? Those relationship questions are memories which came up in the Radical Resonance talkback, right? Like actual canonical memories in the world of things that existed that occurred between these characters. Step 3, you determine your club's status. Is it official, unofficial, or both? Meaning, is it sponsored by the school or an outside organization? Is it just you on your own doing it, or is it like a mix of both? Where like you're gathered together under some official auspices, but then there's a secret something, right? That you got going on in the club. Step 4 is define your club. You give us 4 I'm looking for the term here. Tables, essentially, charts. That's what I'm looking for. 4 charts, framework, conflict, outsiders, and belongings that are each 6 options. So you can roll a d6 on there to be able to answer questions there to define the club more. The guidance officially in here is multiple characters can choose the same chart, roll a 6-sided die, read a corresponding question aloud, answer it. Other players are welcome to offer suggestions, including the guide, but the final answer is the person who rolled. If anybody has follow-up questions, answer those as well. And it says at a baseline, choose one of the following charts to do this on. So it's relatively low lift. Each person's just doing one of those. Speaking completely frankly, I had them do more of that in the AP because Danny likes that. And because it was good for what we were doing with the AP, right? So folks at home, you could theoretically do more of it if you want. Like it's your table, right? Like nobody's stopping you. But at a baseline,
I'm gonna come to your house and I'm gonna stop you.
You're gonna be like, no, don't do it. But these are incisive questions about the framework, conflict, outsiders, and belongings that involve your club, right? Then past that, step 5, to describe your home base. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 home bases you can choose from as a type. The lab, the garage, the squat, the front, the bunker, and the fort, all of which can be customized past that point and are, in part, through stuff that you do once you pick that. So you pick which one of those you want as a group, then you choose 2 among the look, 1 among the benefit, 1 among the snag, and answer 3 questions within the question list that's there for whichever one of those you choose. You handle that as a group. Essentially, the choose ones are like a vote. The choose 3, what I ended up doing at my tables was, if people wanted to, I made sure everybody got to answer 1 question, right? But the truth of the matter is, maybe not everybody wants to, and it's good that not everybody has to, probably, because it should be an invitation, not like an expectation. Then there's step 6, choose your club belief, where you give us 3 general options. We have something important. We must do this alone. We are the chosen ones. And then within each of those, there are 4 areas of questions that are made available. piece of the puzzle, something that was taken or lost, something dangerous, while not something someone are, for example, the ones for we have something important. Each of those have 4 questions within them. As a group, you choose one of the club beliefs, and then the guide asks a few questions from the list from that belief. Discuss the answers together, spending 1 or 2 minutes per question. Leave plenty of room for additional details and surprises to be filled in during play. That is just the creating the club part before you create the town. And it is what the players I've had the privilege of working with have very enthusiastically embraced as a game unto itself. When I do things in the future with an AP, I hope to make more visible to people watching, right? We don't have time. I'd love to talk to you about all of these things in detail. We don't have time for that. I would love for you to talk about the overall process of it, the thinking behind it, and whatever you think is most important to highlight about it, what you want people to take away from that process.
The club creation process really came from the initial notes that Evil Hat gave me from the first playtest that I did with them. One of them was, I think I mentioned before, that they wanted to see immediately what the game was about. And the game is about the club. It's about community. So a lot of our writing at that point went into this whole section about the club, creating the club, questions about the club, a lot of the stuff that's there. There were also like mini club games that I wrote. Like I went way heavy into club. A couple of those questions came from future playtests and further notes about like questioning why is this up to kids to deal with, which led to the club belief. And then all of that kind of got pared down into what it is now. I like hearing that it's like a mini game. I've been feeling like it's too much, so it's nice hearing that people enjoy it as it is.
For what it's worth, I think that it's easy for people to think it's too much before they get into it, and then when they get into it, I mean, speaking of Avery Alder, somebody compared it to The Quiet Years, right? Yeah. In one of the talkbacks for one of the shows. In a very, very positive sense, right? Like that's a Quiet Years an amazing game. Like it's a huge compliment. You know what I mean? Like it's a very good comparison to make. People love it, and the way that they engage in the campaign in the wake of that is meaningfully different in a way that I don't think would exist if it didn't have this kind of detailed process. And because the detail respects them as collaborators, as having authorial input that has teeth, that matters.
The other thing that comes of that, I think I've heard you mention this in some of the talkbacks too, is like this gives the guide a whole bunch of stuff that the players are already excited about. And when I know you did a lot of this asynchronously, but when you can do it in a group, and like then you really hit the pieces where like somebody says something and everybody else is like, ooh yeah, like so you can get the feel for like, even among the things that everyone is already interested in, the things that they're really interested in. Which I agree, it doesn't need to be done in person, but it is nice when it's done that way, to get that little extra bit of feeling from it.
100%. And then you go on to give people the opportunity to describe the town, create the town, right? So you're able to describe the town itself with just a single word or phrase that then gets synthesized, right, into a collective description. Same thing with the school, right? You're able to describe the school, and then you're able to take a third step, adding details. When the brief descriptions are established, the guide asks each player 2 questions from the following lists, or lists of 3. And they're by reputation, right? So these questions bring it back to the player agency in a way that is specific to their position in the group, the way that they're seen, and things that reflect things that they've done about their characters. And then you give guidance here about continuous collaborative storytelling and essentially how this is iterative, right? And in the text, so everybody knows, you provide sample stuff, you provide quick start stuff. So if people don't want to go through that whole process and they want to try out the game, they can pick that up and go. And you used some of that material for Centrifuge, right?
Yes, one of the quick start aliens I used for Centrifuge, but we did build the town.
Right. So you can mix and match to that point, right? Because again, we're not going to go home and stop you, right? Like, nobody's going to show up and stop you for doing that.
It was also funny in watching the APs. There were certain times when I could be like, "Oh, I know what question that feature of the town came from." Like, I'm pretty sure the grain silo was probably the tallest structure in town.
Yeah, 100% it was. Yeah, that's definitely the question. And it's very cool to see. I'd love to get into that more, as if you'll indulge me with a final question. I got to talk about it for my fellow guides out there. We put a lot of love into especially talking about what is so great about this game as a player who's playing not in the guide seat but in the other seats, although we've talked about a lot of stuff that's good for the guides. And I got to tell you, so good for low prep, right? Relatively speaking, because you're putting a lot into this, but a lot of it's democratized through this process. So like, you get stuff that everybody cares about. Also, you don't have to make those things now. People made them for you and you can use that. And they care about those things, so you don't have to worry about hooks as much. And then you can play to find out. The final piece of that I want to highlight is the piece that isn't so player-facing, which is the Alien Threat Maker. That is such a gorgeous piece of design and did exist to some degree on the one sheet. Like, the one pager has an alien threat section. Aliens are roll 1d6 twice and you get 2 of these things. And then their ship is roll 1d6 twice and you get 2 of these things, which still kind of exists in the. It's a
some of those things are.
So tell me about the genesis of the Alien Threat Maker, what you hope it'll achieve, and what you hope people will take from it.
One of the things that I enjoyed, I mean, I've mentioned that I wrote a bunch of one-page games, but I also played a bunch of one-page games. And a thing that I like in them is a lot of them are designed where it's zero prep. You sit down with this sheet of paper and the person who's in the GM seat rolls some dice to find out what's going on. The witch is dead again. You roll to find out who killed the witch. You roll to find out what the town is like, what the threats are like. All of that is just randomized. So that's why I did it in the one-page sheet, because it's something that I enjoyed, and it's also kind of a convention, I guess. And there's not a lot there. Again, it's a small amount of space. There's not a lot of detail that could go into that. So in expanding it, it made me really happy to be able to expand that part of it as much as I wanted to. And I still took inspiration from what was already there. Like, some of the choices in that list of 6 things are still part of the Alien Threat Maker. I wanted it to be a lot bigger, and I felt like an easy way to do that would be to use cards rather than dice. I haven't mentioned another one of my very favorite games is For the Queen. Absolutely love For the Queen. So I like card-based things. And I think in the earliest version of this, I'm trying to actually remember, you used the full deck, but the face cards were the club creation and the number cards were the alien threat. So there was this like splitting up the deck into 2 things. Obviously that's not how it is anymore, so I at some point brought those face cards back into the alien threat.
And that gave us specific aliens that we could have.
Yeah.
Right? And I thought that was extremely cool, because that's also helpful for NPC creation. Like, this Oracle doesn't just give the writ large version of the alien threat. I'm also able to derive at least some NPC possibilities from that, which is really cool.
Yeah, and going back to the words, loving words, me too. I think my favorite thing in Alien Threat is making the characters, because it becomes just like 2 words that you put together, and like, what is this being now that uses these two words, and I'll use it for human NPCs too. Like if like, oh, there's going to be a sheriff, I'll draw a couple cards and be like, what's the sheriff like? Oh, they're a beautiful glutton. What?
Yeah. What is a beautiful glutton? Like being able to unpack that is such a gift. I love that.
Yeah, but it's like I mentioned before, I also have fun just playing with the threat maker. So it was a thing I made for me, really, that I can dig into and play with, and I like being able to just take these different facets and build something out of it. And I think it's also important in there to like say you can throw a card away, you can draw another card if you want to. It's not
right. It's not meant to be like it is not meant to be a punishment. You know what I mean? It's like, oh no, I pulled something I don't want. The fact that, okay, to give everybody the process, you pull 2 cards to describe an alien creature, you fuse them together to form a single species. Third card determines alien's motivation. Last 2 cards describe their ship, combine these 2 into a single vessel. Jokers, I'm so glad you included them, create conflict or deceit that complicates relationships within the group of aliens. If the prompt for the card you flipped isn't something you want to explore, you can choose to set that card aside. You've got creature section, you got a motivation section, a ship section, a character section. You've got a section with guidance on putting the pieces together, and then an example, and then you provided quick start threats. So again, people can pick those up as they like. And in the quick start threats, you include what the pull was for that. So you're modeling specifically what's there. It's really easy to follow. It's very evocative. Especially when you come to, after all the pulls are done, putting the pieces together. How do the aliens arrive? Quietly and unseen with blatant terror or destruction, or calmly with a facade of diplomacy? What does it seem they want? How are they dangerous? What effect will they have? Who are the individual alien characters? What role do they play? Great way to get around the blank page problem. Giving people, because these are not particularly leading questions, generally speaking, giving them the opportunity to be like, okay, I can think about this. This can help me ground that. Same thing with the prompts, right? That you pull here in combination, the way that lands for me is not the way it's going to land for the next person, etc.
Right.
That's why it's an oracle, and I love that. Thank you for talking to me about this. Thank you for building this beautiful game. I'm going to tell everybody, you play the game, obviously, and run the game. It's part of why I wanted to end on talking about guide stuff, because I got to tell you, running this game is a gift. It's a beautiful opportunity. Alien Threat Maker, I would also just use for fun separately. I'd use it for creative projects. I'd use it for other stuff. Like I want to take it with me everywhere. I had wanted to give you time to ask me more questions about the APs, and I know we've run out of time on that. So if you want, no pressure, you can share questions with me after. Like you can just send me stuff. I will write. I'll record something on my side and be like, here's the things that Em wanted to ask me, and I'll put it up. Okay. Like we'll put it somewhere so that you can do that if you want. If you don't have to, you don't have to do it. Because I know we talked about a lot of the AP stuff as we went, so maybe that covered everything. But is there a final word you would like to share with everyone? Be it about like making these games, opening up for open playtesting, people who want to play the game, people who want to run the game, anything you haven't been able to say yet, or the last thing you want to leave them with that you want to ask?
I will say, you just mentioned being the guide for this game is a lot of fun. I agree. I also don't get much chance to be a player, so if anybody out there wants to run a game for me and Danny,
I would love to be in the Rocket Club with you. Oh man, because I was about to offer, I'm like, I'll run it for you, and I will still run for you if you want. But like, I definitely want to be a player with you. Like, I'm very excited.
Yeah, so we gotta find somebody to do that. And like, again, thank you everybody who has engaged with this game in any way. Reach out, talk to me about it. Even if you haven't had a chance, I'm probably going to be running some more internal playtests. I'm definitely going to be running some more internal playtests as I do some revisions, so I might be looking for players for that. And big, huge thank you to Danny for putting this conversation together. Always just lovely talking to you, and also for running all of the amazing actual plays. I got so much out of just being able to see them, so thank you.
Of course. Thank you for trusting me with this game, for creating it so that any of us could engage with it, and for sitting down with me today to talk through all this. I really appreciate it. I know it's been a long discussion. I still feel like I'm barely scratching the surface because this is complex and interesting. Yeah, 100%. Well, if we hopefully get to do this again, because I want to do more of this in the future, we'll come back and we'll talk about more of it. We'll talk about what's changed with the game and all that. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Really appreciate it. Check out the game. Stick around. Join the Discord. If you're watching this on YouTube, like and subscribe. We're trying to get to 1,000 followers because YouTube lets us do other things when we do that. And we want to do more things for the community. Come hang out with us. Check it out. Check out all the APs on this channel and the other channels we mentioned, which are probably going to be linked somewhere for this game, including Centrifuge, which Em ran super well. It was a ton of fun. It was very light and can show you it doesn't have to be terrifying and depressing all the time. It can actually be lots of different things. And even among the games that I ran, there was a lot of different things that we were able to do because the game lends itself to a lot of that. Check that out. Check out the other educational videos alongside this one explaining different things, the different facets of the game, how you dig into them so you can learn more that way. We hope you have a great rest of your day. See you soon.